Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales. Chapter 5099. Kang Xinmu's two defensive dragon weapons were activated at the same time, protecting his black divine dragon body. The endless attacks from the dragon god's soul swept towards him from all directions, causing more and more wounds to appear on his dragon scales. The black dragon scales on his body had been damaged countless times, but they were healed by the recovery ability of the dark dragon filth controlling skill each time. But now, just the effects of the dark dragon inferiority technique alone could not completely heal his injuries. I can only rely on the devouring power, Kang Xinmu sighed in his heart. When he relied on the devouring power to heal himself, it meant that the devouring power could no longer convert the power into his own energy. He used part of the power he devoured to heal himself, while the other part was used to recover his strength. However, as the attacks became stronger and his injuries worsened, the power he devoured could only be used to heal himself. When that time came, Kang Xinmu would not be able to hold on any longer. If there was a specific opponent, Kang Xinmu could think about how to defeat his opponent and prevent himself from reaching that stage. However, now, there were endless attacks around him, and there was no specific opponent at all. He could only continue to defend passively. Under such circumstances, he could only continue to persevere. There are still 7 people. No, there are still 6 people continuing. And 2 of them are almost unable to hold on any longer. Kang Xinmu could vaguely sense the situation of the others in the hall. As there were not many people left, he could roughly sense their state. Just now, another female dragon martial artist could not hold on any longer and retreated from the Pillar of Light. In the end, including Kang Xinmu, there were only 6 people left. Among them, 2 of them seemed to be quite weak. This meant that after these 2 people were eliminated, Kang Xinmu would only be left with 3 opponents. As long as he could hold on until the other 3 could no longer hold on, he would win. The power of a level 3 transcendent god's attack had already put a lot of pressure on everyone. That was an attack that was close to the peak of a grade 6 disciple. It was not something they could casually block. Even if there were a few people who could block it, they basically had their own trump cards. For example, Kang Xinmu had too many trump cards. If it wasn't for the devouring power, he wouldn't have lasted until now. The others were the same, they all had their own secrets. Of course, it was impossible for it to be a terrifying power like the devouring power. Instead, it should only be some super powerful dragon weapons, dragon martial skills, or brilliant materials. There were brilliant materials that could increase the defensive prowess of a dragon warrior. There were also some void energy that could completely negate a portion of the opponent's attacks. To be able to persist until now, every single one of them had their own strengths. After all, these were the disciples of the holy lands of the entire dragon god's great world. There were bound to be some elites among them. If it was just the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land, Kang Xinmu probably wouldn't be able to find many people who could compete with him. But now, Kang Xinmu felt a certain amount of pressure. Ran must have felt the same way back then, right? Kang Xinmu felt helpless. There were still many geniuses and experts in the dragon god's world. Even a genius like Ran couldn't get first place among the 4th-class disciples. It could be seen that Kang Xinmu had to be careful now. He didn't want to fail miserably. In the second round of the defense competition, Kang Xinmu's advantage was very obvious. He had to obtain the final victory. Brilliant ruby stone, open. Finally, after persevering for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the energy in Jiang Xinwu's body was almost exhausted. He could only choose to open the brilliant ruby stone again and create an absolute defense barrier. The others also used the brilliant ruby stone to resist the attacks for a period of time. However, Kang Xinmu could gather enough energy for the brilliant ruby stone in a short period of time and use it again. The others could only use it once in 7 days. When Kang Xinmu opened the brilliant ruby stone, a golden light enveloped his entire body. Other than the black dragon's body, all the attacks were blocked by the golden light. This was a powerful defense barrier that could withstand a peak Supreme God. When the surrounding attack power was at level 3 Supreme God, it could completely resist for a long period of time. Kang Xinmu took advantage of this time to continuously devour the surrounding energy with his devouring power to recover his own energy. Soon, he recovered to his peak state. At the same time, he also converted a portion of the energy he devoured into the power of the brilliant ruby stone. The spectral energy battle patterns in Chen Xing's dragon weapon were all converted at this time and charged the brilliant ruby stone. However, because the two were not on the same dragon weapon, the efficiency of charging was not very high. In short, if Kang Xinmu wanted to use the brilliant ruby stone again, he might need another 5 minutes. The key to whether Kang Xinmu could survive the next 5 minutes was how he would spend it. Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Technique, Defense Stance. Chen Xing, Defense Battle Pattern Transformation. When the brilliant ruby stone's condensed barrier was about to shatter, Kang Xinmu once again returned to his defense stance. Then, his entire black dragon body soared into the air. The barrier shattered, and countless wind, rain, thunder, and lightning powers whistled in from the surroundings, drowning Kang Xinmu's black dragon. At this time, it was already at the peak of level 3 Supreme God. The terrifying destructive power instantly caused Kang Xinmu's black dragon body to suffer a strong impact, and his dragon scales shattered. However, unknowingly, the other dragon warriors in the hall had all been defeated. In the entire hall, Jiang Shenwu was the only one left who was still resisting. The last few dragon warriors who had been defeated had lasted almost the same amount of time. Now, the power of the attacks was really unbearable. If they could withstand it, they would no longer be 5th-class disciples. Why would they still be here? However, as 5th-class disciples, being able to last until now was already quite terrifying. And Kang Xinmu was clearly much stronger than them. At least in terms of defense. In the end, the few of them all came to the light pillar where Kang Xinmu was and observed the situation inside. This guy is actually only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor? We actually didn't last until the end. This Dragon Emperor is actually this strong at the peak? The difference of a major realm caused the strength of the dragon warriors to be extremely different. Generally speaking, the difference between the peak of the Dragon Emperor and level 1 Supreme God was like heaven and earth. Less than 1 in 10,000 dragon warriors could defeat an ordinary level 1 Supreme God when they were at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. And who was not talented enough to last until now? Chapter 5100. To these first-stage Transcendent God Dragon Warriors, they had always been the only ones who could challenge others. They had never encountered anyone who could challenge them. That was why they could resist the attacks of second-stage Transcendent Gods and even third-stage Transcendent Gods with their first-stage Transcendent Gods. They had indeed defeated some second-stage Transcendent Gods before. However, third-stage Transcendent Gods were still an insurmountable gap for them. One must not underestimate these fellows. Being able to jump levels to defeat an opponent at the level of a Transcendent God was not an easy task in itself. Basically, no one could jump 2 levels to defeat an opponent. That was why they were all favored by the heavens. The genius disciples of the various holy lands were famous in their respective holy lands. However, they were all silent now. They had not expected a dragon warrior from the 5 extreme mysterious ice holy land. He was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor's divine dragon inheritance blood essence, but he was able to last until the end. The attack at the last moment had already reached the peak of third-stage Transcendent God. How could this guy block it? That was too terrifying. Everyone was observing Jiang Shenwu's every move in the small world of the Pillar of Light. They all remembered this black dragon in their hearts. In the next round, they would definitely have a certain amount of vigilance towards him. No matter what, a guy with such strong defense was worthy of their attention. In the small world of the light pillar, Kang Shinmu was still resisting the continuous attacks around him. His black dragon body was constantly being blasted with huge wounds. However, the devouring power devoured the power and transformed it into the essence of life and flesh to heal his injuries. This was the effect of the Dragon Emperor's devouring power. In the past, the devouring power could not devour ordinary power to heal his injuries. But now, he could do it. Logically speaking, the devouring power could devour any power and transform it into any power. It could even devour any matter. This was the truly terrifying devouring power. However, the current Kang Shinmu could not find a way to completely control the devouring power. To him, the devouring power was still mysterious and difficult to control. But no matter what, this was the power that allowed him to rise and stand here. He didn't rely on the power of devouring, but at his current stage, it could indeed make him stronger. In any case, the black dragon's consciousness in his body was being suppressed by the demon god ancestor's consciousness, so Kang Shinmu could use the power of devouring without restraint. Devour. As Kang Shinmu's devouring power erupted, the surrounding attacks were all devoured by Kang Shinmu. This energy was quickly converted into the essence of flesh and blood to heal Kang Shinmu's injuries. A part of it was also replenished into the energy of the brilliant gem. His black dragon body was constantly being injured, but after being injured, it rapidly recovered, finally. When Kang Shinmu devoured and healed his divine dragon body countless times, he suddenly felt a surge of heat surging through his body. This is a breakthrough? Kang Shinmu's heart thumped. At this critical juncture, he really did break through. However, it was not his cultivation that broke through, nor was it the grade of the divine dragon's inheritance blood essence, but the dragon martial technique. Divine dragon martial technique, divine dragon tyrant body technique, and high-grade origin source dragon martial technique, dark dragon inferiority technique. Of course, Kang Shinmu now knew that the dark dragon inferiority technique was not an ordinary high-grade origin source dragon martial technique, but a simplified version of a divine dragon martial technique. The effect of the dark dragon inferiority technique was not very different from the original divine dragon martial technique, but it was much easier to cultivate. This was the reason why the dark dragon inferiority technique was so heaven-defying. Whether it was Ran or Kang Shinmu, they had both improved a lot because they cultivated the dark dragon inferiority technique. Divine dragon tyrant body technique, supreme sage realm. Dark dragon inferiority technique, supreme sage realm. These two main body-tempering dragon martial techniques that Kang Shinmu cultivated had both broken through to the supreme sage realm. The supreme sage realm was the highest realm. In other words, Kang Shinmu had cultivated these two dragon martial techniques to their limits, to the point where they could no longer be improved. The effect of this was that Kang Shinmu could now withstand the endless attacks of the divine dragon souls around him. Of course, he would still be injured, but the injuries would be very light. Even if he was injured, he could recover with the effect of the dark dragon inferiority technique. My defense has at least doubled. And my recovery speed has increased by at least 5 times. Kang Shinmu's breakthrough in these two dragon martial techniques had brought him a turning point. He had originally thought that he would not be able to hold on for much longer, but the breakthrough in these two dragon martial techniques allowed him to hold on for a longer period of time. It seems like I'm the only one left? Since he was the only one left, it did not matter whether he could hold on or not. In any case, Kang Shinmu had secured first place in the second round of defense. However, Kang Shinmu did not give up. This was because he remembered that he had received a hint. If he wanted to obtain the heart of the dragon soul, he had to perform well. The heart of the dragon soul was something related to the ancestral dragon. It was said that only the dragon martial artist who obtained the heart of the dragon soul had the possibility of becoming the ancestral dragon. Therefore, Kang Xinmu had to give it his all and give everything he had to obtain it. In this second round of defense, Kang Xinmu did not need to compete with others. He only needed to compete with himself. Continue. All the dragon scales on Kang Xinmu's body flickered with a pitch-black light at almost the same time. The appearance of this pitch-black light made his body incomparably strong. The attacks of the divine dragon souls around him swept over and left marks on his body. However, these marks were quickly healed by the effect of the dark dragon inferiority technique. What's going on? This kid's defense seems to have suddenly increased by a large margin. Could it be that his dragon martial technique suddenly had a breakthrough? It seems like this is the only possibility. How is this possible? He is currently only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor. To be able to hold on until now, he must have long cultivated the defensive dragon martial technique to the supreme sage realm, right? All the dragon martial artists who were observing Kang Xinmu were extremely shocked. They had originally thought that Kang Xinmu was definitely holding on in his peak state. They did not expect that Kang Xinmu still had room for improvement. It was fine that he used the brilliant gem to block the attack just now. After all, many people present had the brilliant gem. It was indeed extremely powerful in terms of defense. Chapter 5101. No one had expected Kang Xinmu to be able to break through under such circumstances. However, this was the truth. With the breakthrough of Kang Xinmu's two dragon-type body refining techniques, he had finally reached the true peak of the Dragon Emperor's inherited blood essence. Of course, if one had to say it, Kang Xinmu had yet to completely merge with the dragon weapon. However, this did not matter. The current Kang Xinmu could be said to be at the limit of the Dragon Emperor's peak. It was very difficult for other Dragon Emperor's peak cultivators to be stronger than him. This was because the other Dragon Emperor's peak cultivators might not even be able to break through Kang Xinmu's defense. As long as Kang Xinmu activated his guardian mode, he would be invincible in front of the Dragon Emperor's peak. Of course, the prerequisite was that Kang Xinmu was in his current state, which was to use his devouring power to devour the various elemental powers to allow his resistance to reach its peak. If he were to fight one-on-one, Kang Xinmu would have to be careful. If some people attacked fiercely, it would not be easy for Kang Xinmu to block them. With Kang Xinmu's breakthrough, he could easily block the attacks from the surrounding divine dragon souls. Terrifying power kept sweeping over, but it could not break through his physical defense. Then, the surrounding divine dragon souls suddenly launched an even more terrifying attack. An attack at the level of the Transcendent God Stage 4. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, ice, and flames dyed the entire small world of the Pillar of Light into a huge furnace. Kang Xinmu felt immense pressure once again. There was a huge gap between the Transcendent God Stage 4 and the Transcendent God Stage 3. The fourth level was the intermediate stage of the Transcendent God Stage, while the third level was the beginner stage of the Transcendent God Stage. There was an absolute suppression between them. Among all the Transcendent God Stage 3 dragon martial artists, only 100,000 or even 1 in a million dragon martial artists could defeat a Transcendent God Stage 4 opponent. This meant that the difference was even greater than the difference between the peak of the Dragon Emperor and the first stage of the Transcendent God. Now that a level 4 Transcendent God had attacked, Kang Xinmu was stunned. The black dragon scales on his body were instantly blasted into pieces. Then, these dragon scales were scorched, chopped into pieces, and dissipated in the wind, rain, and thunder. But Kang Xinmu did not give up. Although the attack caught him off guard, he was still able to react in time. Brilliant gemstone. His brilliant ornate stone had already recovered its energy. He had used his devouring power and spectral battle runes to recover its energy. At this moment, the golden light once again condensed into a barrier. After this barrier appeared, the surrounding attacks were all blocked outside. Kang Shinmu's black divine dragon body started to recover rapidly. He didn't use his devouring power, but instead relied on the Supreme Sage level Dark Dragon Filth Mastery to recover rapidly. Too strong. The recovery ability of the Supreme Sage level Dark Dragon Filth Mastery was simply terrifying. Kang Shinmu had seen Ran Ran's recovery speed before, but he didn't expect it to be so powerful when it happened to him. After all, he had never seen Ran Ran in a severely injured state. However, now that he thought about it, Ran Ran must have also been severely injured during the 4th class disciple competition, and then the Dark Dragon Filth Mastery kept recovering for her. Ran Ran had won the overall 2nd place in the 4th class disciple competition. Although it seemed like she was doing well, Kang Shinmu knew that she had suffered too much pain to obtain this glory. Although the Dark Dragon Filth Mastery could heal the injuries of dragon warriors, it wouldn't hide the pain that dragon warriors had suffered. When the injuries healed, it was impossible to remain indifferent to the heart-wrenching pain even if one was already used to it. Kang Shinmu was already used to this kind of pain, but he still found it unbearable every time. One could imagine that a girl like Ran Ran, devour. When Kang Shinmu blocked the attack of the 4th stage Transcendent God, Kang Shinmu's devouring power spread rapidly. He hadn't reached his limit yet. 33 Heavenly Divine Feathers. Kang Shinmu finally started using the 33 Heavenly Divine Feathers. The 33 Heavenly Divine Feathers could enhance any of his dragon skills. He didn't cultivate any defensive dragon martial skill, but he cultivated an offensive dragon martial skill. Now, switch from defense to offense. Offensive stance. Kang Shinmu switched the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body technique to an offensive stance. After cultivating the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body technique to the Supreme Sage level, each stance could provide him with a 5-fold increase. In other words, under the offensive stance, the offensive power of any of Kang Shinmu's techniques would increase by 5 times. One had to know that he could only increase it by 1 time. This was a huge increase. At the same time, Kang Shinmu converted all the battle runes in the Dragon Soldier Chun Star into offensive battle runes. 9th Stage Ultimate Dragon Explosion. The 9th Stage Ultimate Dragon Explosion was unleashed together with the 33 Heavenly Divine Feathers. When the golden barrier of the brilliant gem was shattered, Kang Shinmu's 9th Stage Ultimate Dragon Explosion was finally unleashed. The 33 Heavenly Divine Feathers could only unleash 9 attacks now. However, Kang Shinmu's greatest trump card was also used. He had been devouring the power released by the divine dragon souls in the surroundings. At this time, he directly released this power from the devouring space, fusing it into his 9-stage Extreme Dao Dragon Explosion. Borrowing power to attack. The power that attacked him was directly devoured by Kang Shinmu and integrated into his own attack. This increased the power of his 9th-stage Ultimate Dragon Explosion by dozens of times. 81 pitch-black dragon breaths swept out in all directions. With just a bang, all the surrounding attacks were shaken away. This scene immediately caused all the dragon martialists in the hall who were paying attention to Jiang Shenwu to be completely shocked. It can't be. It's one thing for this guy's defense to be so terrifying, but his attack is also so strong. Using attack power to deal with attack. We've had people use this method before. But it's not as exaggerated as him. Look at this kid, he's suffering from an attack at the 4th level of the Transcendent God stage. That's right. We can at most fight against the 2nd level of the Transcendent God stage. At most, we won't be able to withstand it at the 3rd level. No. Look carefully, the aura of his attack is similar to the power outside. What's the principle behind this? In other words, he's borrowing power to attack and using the power of the attack to repel other powers. He can do that? After some discussion, everyone realized that Kang Shinmu's method was unique. Chapter 5102. In this way, the crowd was not as shocked as before. After all, if Kang Shinmu's own strength could compete with a level 4 transcendent god, the others would not even need to fight. However, even if it was as they had guessed, Kang Shinmu's ability to borrow the power of the surrounding attacks was still shocking. That was because the attacks around him were at the level of a level 4 transcendent god. Kang Shinmu could actually borrow such a powerful attack. To be honest, the crowd could already feel the heavy pressure. Kang Shinmu was too powerful. He was so powerful that they did not dare to imagine it. Was he really a grade 5 disciple? Or was he really a dragon martial artist at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level? If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would have believed it if someone said that he was at the level 3 transcendent god. Moreover, Kang Shinmu had just used the brilliant ruby stone twice. Looks like this kid is very rich. The brilliant gem stone was expensive, and it didn't come in handy often. It could only save one's life at critical moments. In a real crisis, one could not rely on the brilliant ruby stone to save one's life. After all, one could only face many crises alone. At such a time, even if one used the brilliant ruby stone to delay time, it would be useless. Those who deserve to die would still die. Moreover, its high price made many dragon martial artists flinch. Therefore, there were very few people who would prepare 2 brilliant gemstones. Now that Kang Shinmu had used the brilliant ruby stone twice, the crowd knew that Kang Shinmu had most likely used the brilliant ruby stone twice on different dragon weapons. This was not a big problem. The key was that Kang Shinmu had displayed the ability to borrow the power around him. Generally speaking, it was not as if others had not seen such power before. Many of the experienced and knowledgeable dragon martial artists of the older generation had seen such power before. Many of them had seen it with their own eyes. However, the key was that it was not that exaggerated. This kind of method was usually only used on opponents of similar strength. At most, the opponent couldn't be too much stronger than the user. Otherwise, it would be impossible to borrow strength, and the opponent would be directly defeated. There were some older dragon martialists present. It wasn't because they were old, but because they had rich experiences. They had even explored intermediate permanent remnants before and had even made some achievements. They had all reached the peak of the Dragon Emperor. However, he couldn't imagine what was going on with Kang Shinmu's ability, devouring power. The devouring power was naturally not something that ordinary people could imagine. If Kang Shinmu had simply borrowed power, it would have been impossible for him to come to such an occasion. However, the key point was that he had the devouring power, which was the key. When it came to testing Kang Shinmu's limits, the devouring power would always be his final trump card. At this moment, he was constantly using his devouring power to devour the energy around him, and then explosively, fusing it with the 9-stage Extreme Dao Qi Dragon Explosion. At this time, he didn't use the multiple attacks of the 33 Divine Feathers. He only used the 9-stage Extreme Dao Qi Dragon Explosion. No matter how many times he used the 9-stage Extreme Dao Qi Dragon Explosion, it wouldn't help the situation. After all, he was mainly relying on the energy that he had devoured, not his own power. Therefore, even if the 9-stage Extreme Dao Qi Dragon Explosion exploded with 33 attacks, the power wouldn't be very strong. Instead, it would expose his trump card. In this competition of defense, I have basically exposed all my trump cards, therefore, I have to hide the 33 Divine Feathers. Now that Kang Shinmu had only used the 9-stage Extreme Dao Qi Dragon Explosion, others might think that it was just the 9-stage gem, but he would let them think so. At the crucial moment, Kang Shinmu's 33 attacks would explode and become his real trump card. At this moment, Kang Shinmu kept using the 9-stage Extreme Dao Qi Dragon Explosion. It seemed like he was easily blocking all the attacks around him. However, in reality, the energy that Kang Shinmu had devoured previously was dissipating at an extremely fast speed. After all, the energy that he had devoured previously was only from the second and third stage of the Transcendent God stage. When facing the attacks of the fourth stage of the Transcendent God stage, he needed to integrate a large amount of energy into it to be able to fight against it. Therefore, the energy that Kang Xinmu had devoured from the devouring space was being consumed at an extremely fast speed. According to Kang Xinmu's estimation, he could probably only last for an hour at most. In fact, it might not even last for an hour. Just as he used the energy that he had devoured to integrate into the 9-stage extreme Dao Qi dragon explosion to fight against the attacks around him, the strength of the attacks around him increased once again. Transcendent God Stage 4, Intermediate. Previously, the attack strength was the same as when he had just entered the fourth stage of the Transcendent God stage. Now, it had increased by another level. Every stage of the Transcendent God stage was divided into beginner, intermediate, advanced, and peak stages. Of course, these stages were just general stages. During cultivation, there would be no obvious signs of a breakthrough. However, the levels of power were obviously different. Every time there was a difference in level, there would be a change in strength. Strength determined the level, not the level. Therefore, if Kang Xinmu broke through to the first stage of the Transcendent God stage, he could be considered to be at the peak of the first stage of the Transcendent God stage. This was because his strength had already reached the peak of the first stage of the Transcendent God stage. When the surrounding attack power increased by a level, the pressure on Kang Xinmu suddenly increased. He did not even have time to integrate the energy that he had devoured into his 9-stage extreme Dao Qi dragon explosion. Devour. 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 Now, Kang Xinmu could only devour and weaken the surrounding attack power through devouring. Then, he would integrate it into his 9-stage extreme Dao Qi dragon explosion and counterattack. That way, he could still barely withstand the current attack. However, he was already close to his limit. Especially now, the energy in his devouring space was being consumed faster and faster. Soon, it would be used up. Hold on. Kang Xinmu gritted his teeth and held on. Now, he had already endured to a stage that others did not even dare to think about. Even an ordinary Transcendent God Stage 3 Dragon Warrior would not be able to hold on for even a moment. However, Kang Xinmu was still able to hold on for so long. The Dragon Warriors who were observing Kang Xinmu were all dumbfounded. This guy can still hold on? How is that possible? Is this guy really only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor? Based on the strength that he has displayed now, he will most likely get first place in the third round of the competition. That might not be the case. However, this guy is definitely one of the strong contenders for first place. Everyone was shocked and their expressions were solemn. This was because they would all be participating in the third round of the competition. It was as if a shadow had been cast over them. No one wanted to meet Kang Xinmu in the third round. Chapter 5103. The attack of the fourth stage Transcendent God followed closely behind. Kang Xinmu did not last long before he was attacked by the strongest attack he had ever encountered. Previously, when he was training in the Outland Stronghold, he had never encountered such an attack. This was because he had to choose his opponents when he was training. He would only provoke suitable opponents. But now, the intensity and difficulty of the attacks had increased without limit, so he had no choice but to challenge them. Is this for me to find my limit? Kang Xinmu gritted his teeth and endured. He felt that he had already exerted all his strength, and there was almost nothing else he could do. The only thing that could make him persevere was the 12 types of battle patterns on the Chen Xing Dragon Soldier. However, many of the battle patterns were ones that Kang Xinmu wanted to hide, and he planned to use them at the last moment. If he used them now for others to see, then his opponent would be prepared at the crucial moment of the final battle. For example, the shadow battle patterns. It was obvious that the shadow battle patterns would be effective in such a defensive environment. They could condense more than 20 doppelgangers of Kong Shinmu's black dragon body and absorb most of the attacks. Kong Shinmu could also continuously condense doppelgangers to absorb the attacks, which would allow him to persist for at least 15 minutes. However, he did not want to use this method now. The other battle patterns on the Chenxing Dragon Soldier were in a similar situation. He did not intend to expose more of his methods unless it was necessary. In that case, the only method I can look forward to now is the devouring power. Kong Shinmu could not help but smile bitterly. The devouring power was really his greatest trump card. Ever since he had stepped onto the path of cultivation as a dragon warrior, the devouring power had always been the one to solve all his problems whenever he encountered extreme difficulties. Unfortunately, the black dragon's consciousness was very low-key now, and it did not dare to make too many movements in the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower. It did not even dare to communicate with Kong Shinmu, and it just hid in the devouring space. The demon god ancestor's consciousness was the same. Kong Shinmu could not ask them, so he could only figure it out himself. How else can the devouring power be used? The black dragon consciousness previously mentioned that this devouring power can devour all matter and all energy. In that case, can I devour the space around me and isolate myself from the surrounding forces? Kong Shinmu did as he thought. He really couldn't hold on any longer, but he wanted to challenge his limits. Everything in the Dragon Soldier Star was external, and he did not intend to borrow too much from it. That way, the results he obtained would not be his real results. If he could do that with his devouring power, that would be his fundamental ability. When he had the thought of devouring space, a pitch-black devouring power surged around his black dragon body and began to devour the surrounding space. The space surrounding Kong Shinmu was completely swallowed up. This scene caused the dragon warriors who were observing Kong Shinmu to be dumbfounded. What kind of technique was this? The circle of space that had been devoured became incomparably pitch-black, as if nothing existed. Then, they could no longer see Kong Shinmu's divine dragon body. They could only see the surrounding forces bombarding the pitch-black circle of space and then vanishing. All the forces disappeared as if they had been devoured by a black hole. No one knew how Kong Shinmu, who was in the pitch-black circle of space, was doing. Had he not been attacked by those forces, or was he unable to hold on any longer? What was that circle of black space? No one guessed that it was a space that had been devoured, but some people still felt that it had something to do with the spatial attribute Void Force. I also relied on the Void Force to get to the 30th place. The hidden expert that Kong Shinmu had been paying attention to, the skinny young man, could not help but narrow his eyes when he saw Kong Shinmu's situation. This skinny young man was very perceptive, or rather, had intuition. After all, when they were observing from the outside, they could not sense the situation inside the Pillar of Light pocket world. It was difficult to guess many things just by looking at it with the naked eye. However, this skinny young man intuitively felt that Kong Shinmu had used a spatial attribute Void Force technique. It had to be said that this young man had guessed half of it correctly. This young man had considerable attainments in the spatial attribute Void Force. In fact, a large part of his concealment ability came from the spatial attribute Void Force. That was the power of his divine dragon blood essence, the dragon martial technique that he cultivated, and some fortuitous encounters. Just like how Gu Xinyue had obtained the psychedelic astral crystal, this kind of fortuitous encounter had a great effect on improving one's strength. And now, in the field, Kong Shinmu had used his devouring power to devour the space around his divine dragon body. Then, he felt as if he had been isolated from the entire Pillar of Light pocket world. All the light, sound, and energy around him had disappeared. It was as if Kong Shinmu had arrived in an abandoned pocket world that was completely isolated from the outside world. What's going on? Kong Shinmu had a strange expression on his face. The extremely fierce attack just now had suddenly disappeared. He was at a loss as to what to do. He had seen the ability to devour space before. In the relic of the heavenly deficient demonic dragon of ice and fire's inheritance, Kang Shinmu had seen a sacred item that could burn space. That sacred item had finally combined into a sacred item that was rebranded. Now, in his master's hands, come to think of it, that heaven and earth saint item also had the ability to devour or burn space. So, this ability shouldn't be too heaven-defying, right? Kang Shinmu thought to himself. But what he did not know was that although this ability was not rare, it was extremely rare in the current dragon god's great world. The sacred item that the heavenly deficient demonic dragon of ice and fire had come from a long time ago. And now, the ability that Kang Shinmu displayed to devour space had directly attracted the attention of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. Or rather, his devouring power had long attracted the attention of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower. That was why he had received a notification from the Dragon Soul Holy Tower when he exited the pocket world. Of course, the notification was undoubtedly kind. The Dragon Soul Holy Tower had no ill intentions towards Kang Shinmu. It was the same at this moment. The entire Pillar of Light pocket world had undergone some changes after he displayed his ability to devour space. No one could see that the entire Pillar of Light pocket world had shrunk as a result. The circle of pitch-black space that had been devoured was gradually filled up by the surrounding space. The Dragon Soul Holy Tower did not appear. Instead, it directly repaired the Pillar of Light pocket world. When the Pillar of Light pocket world was completely repaired, Kang Shinmu would face a storm of attacks from all around again. At that time, he would not be able to continue devouring space. Chapter 5104. In theory, Kang Shinmu's devouring power could devour any energy and matter, even space. However, there was a limit to the total amount of energy and matter that he could devour. The limit was his devouring space. As his cultivation level increased, his devouring space expanded continuously. Now, the size of his devouring space was 100 times larger than when he had just stepped into the Dragon Emperor realm. As the devouring space expanded, Kang Shinmu could devour and store more energy and resources. However, at that moment, Kang Shinmu had only devoured a little bit of space, and the devoured space had almost filled up the devouring space. Isn't this space too big? Kang Shinmu was a little puzzled, but he also understood that it was not because the devouring space was too big, but because the devoured space itself occupied a larger space within the devouring space. That was why the devouring space was already filled up when he had only devoured a little bit of space. At that moment, he could no longer devour space. The power of the Dragon Soul Holy Tower to repair the space was extremely powerful. Basically, it only took a moment for the devoured space to be repaired. Meanwhile, Kang Shinmu was once again facing the attacks of the divine dragon souls from all directions. At this moment, Jiang Shenwu released the space he had devoured and bombarded it in all directions. These spaces, upon leaving the devoured space, shrunk to their normal size and filled up the space of the small world within the Pillar of Light. Unfortunately, it could not stop the attacks of the surrounding divine dragon souls. Most importantly, the attacks of the surrounding divine dragon souls had finally transformed again. They had reached the level of the Transcendent God Stage 5. In the face of continuous attacks of this level, Kang Shinmu really could not resist them. The next moment, Kang Shinmu's black dragon body no longer struggled in vain. Although he could still use the brilliant gem once and some other techniques, to Kang Shinmu, this was almost his limit. If he persisted any longer, he would not be able to persist until the surrounding attacks increased again. The beginner stage of Transcendent God Level 5 was almost enough to kill Kang Shinmu. He couldn't hold on for that long, so he didn't have to struggle anymore. He could also avoid exposing more of his trump cards for others to see. Finally, Kong Shinmu was blasted out of the small world by a fifth-stage transcendent god. However, even though he was blasted out, the surrounding dragon martial artists were still extremely shocked. Although they didn't know what kind of technique Kong Shinmu had used, the fact that he could persist for so long and use a technique that most people couldn't understand had left a deep impression on them. Devour space. This was not something that a dragon martial artist could see at any time and place. Now, it was even rarer for the fifth-class disciples of the various supreme sacred grounds to see through this technique. Only the skinny young man, the hidden expert, narrowed his eyes at the last moment, as if he had seen through something. Of course, he didn't completely understand Kong Shinmu's method of devouring space. However, he was clearer than others and knew that Kong Shinmu had used the power and ability of space. The second round of the fifth-class disciple competition, Defense Trial. 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, Kong Shinmu, wins first place. As the majestic voice of the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower resounded throughout the entire hall, everyone looked at Kong Shinmu in shock. They had never thought that the first place of this defense trial would be won by a dragon martial artist at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm. There were so many supreme god-level powerhouses, but none of them could defeat this Dragon Emperor peak dragon martial artist. This was too shocking. What kind of monster did the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land produce? Everyone was thinking that just the number of points Jiang Shenwu had obtained from taking first place in this trial of defense alone was enough for the 5 Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land's overall score to enter the top 10. If Kong Shinmu could still obtain first place in the third round of the final battle, the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land would definitely enter the top 3. This was under the premise that the other fifth-class disciples of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land were performing poorly. Kong Shinmu didn't know any of the other fifth-class disciples of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. Thus, he didn't pay too much attention to them. However, when he looked around, he discovered that there were 2 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land disciples who had actually stayed until the last round. This means that among the final 128 people, 3 of them are from the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. Kong Shinmu smiled slightly. This meant that the fifth-class disciple competition of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land was quite stable. As long as he obtained first place, the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land could even make a run for first place. Of course, the exact ranking still depended on the performance of the other 2. But no matter what, the number of points that Kong Shinmu had obtained was already quite terrifying. It was enough to bring him many rewards. Whether it was the final reward from the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower or the final reward from the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, they were enough for him to obtain many resources. These resources were very useful to him. The most important thing was to unseal the seal on the small universe. This required a lot of cultivation resources. In fact, Kong Shinmu felt that completely unsealing the seal was something that would take an indefinite amount of time. He was far from seeing any hope of doing so. He had only unsealed 2 layers of seal, yet he had already spent so many resources. He had trained in the Outer Realm Fortress for more than half a year and had also made great contributions. Even so, he was only able to unseal 2 layers of seal on the small universe. From this, it could be seen just how many cultivation resources were needed to unseal the seal on the small universe. Cultivation resources were what Kong Shinmu needed the most right now. If he could unseal 3 layers of seal on the small universe, then Kong Shinmu would have a much better chance of entering a permanent mid-grade ruin. Next, I need to find a companion to fight against the Dragon Soul Golem. Kong Shinmu looked at the skinny youth that he had his eyes on. This was the fellow with an extremely strong concealment ability. Of course, he also glanced at the 2 fifth-class disciples of the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land. After all, they were all from the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land, so he still had to consider the feelings of his own people. However, When Kang Xinmu looked over, he discovered that the two disciples of the Five Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land had already formed a small team. The man and woman had already joined forces and were planning to fight against the Dragon Soul Golem together. In reality, although they wanted to be with Kang Xinmu, it was clear that they weren't on the same level. The man and woman were both ranked outside the top 100. If they were with Kang Xinmu, they would basically drag Kang Xinmu down. Chapter 5105. Kang Xinmu wasn't surprised by the choice of the male and female disciples of the Five Extreme Mysterious Ice Holy Land. And Kang Xinmu didn't plan to form a team with the other Supreme God-level Dragon Martial Artist disciples. This was because the strength of the Dragon Soul Demon statue depended on the challenger's cultivation base. Kang Xinmu and the Hidden Youth were both at the peak of the Dragon Emperor level. This meant that if the two of them formed a team, the strength of the Dragon Soul Demon statue would be much lower than that of the other teams, and it would be easier for them to defeat the Dragon Soul Demon statue they encountered. "How should I address you, brother?" The hidden powerhouse, the skinny youth, came forward and asked Kang Xinmu with a smile. "Kang Xinmu, what about you?" Kang Xinmu asked back. "Call me Yi-In." The skinny youth nodded and said, "Yi-In." Kang Xinmu also nodded, and the two of them walked together toward the center of the hall. After the defense challenge round, there was a casual round of challenging the Dragon Soul Demon statues. This round didn't count towards the points of the competition between the Holy Lands, but the rewards that each person could obtain were closely related to their results. In the center of the hall, there were already two teams that had been teleported to the Dragon Soul Demon statue space. There were fewer and fewer Dragon Martial Artist disciples in the hall. Soon, it was Kang Xinmu and Yi-In's turn. When they stood in the center of the hall, they felt a pillar of light descend and envelop them. Immediately after, they felt that they had been teleported to another space. This was the hall of an ancient temple. There were a total of 4 walls around the shrine hall. On each wall, there were 3 lifelike statues of divine dragons. These divine dragon statues were made of black metal crystals, and each of them exuded a tyrannical aura of dragon energy. There are a total of 12 Dragon Soul Demon statues, and each of them has a different attribute and power. I heard that as long as one can defeat a Dragon Soul Demon statue, one can obtain a good reward. If all 12 Dragon Soul Demon statues are defeated, the rewards will be unimaginable. Kang Xinmu thought. His partner, Yi-In, seemed to have the same idea. "Let's discuss our tactics. We'll take turns to hide and ambush the Dragon Soul Golems," Kang Xinmu whispered to Yi-In. "Of course, it depends on the specific situation." "All right." Yi-In nodded. The reason why Kang Xinmu sought him out was not only because he could conceal himself well, but also because his defense was not weak. Under such circumstances, it could be inferred that Yi-In's attack power was definitely not too weak. Of course, the two of them were very likely to become opponents in the third round of the battle. Under such circumstances, it was worth considering whether they should unleash their full strength when challenging the Dragon Soul Golem. Kang Xinmu didn't mind. Yi-In probably wouldn't pose any threat to Kang Xinmu in the third round of the battle. The two of them didn't have much time to prepare. As they entered the Hall of the Divine Hall, a divine dragon statue on the wall in front of them suddenly seemed to come to life. The divine dragon statue suddenly loosened, then let out a dragon roar, and flew up in the empty hall. "It's a water attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue. Get ready to fight," Kang Xinmu immediately said in a deep voice. Yi-In directly transformed into a dragon in front of Kang Xinmu without thinking, and then hit himself. If Jiang Shenwu didn't activate the clear battle rune, he really couldn't find any traces of him. However, it was impossible for Lin Li to frame Kang Xinmu in this round of challenging the Dragon Soul Demon statue, as it wouldn't benefit either party. Therefore, Kang Xinmu didn't care about Yi Yin's position. He directly transformed into a dragon and released the divine dragon tyrant body technique to protect himself. Chen Xing, defensive battle runes. Kang Xinmu immediately went into a state of full defense. This was because Kang Xinmu wasn't very sure about the strength of the opponent's dragon soul demon statue. It seemed to be at the second stage of the super divine dragon, but if it was so easy on the surface, this round of challenging the dragon soul demon statue wouldn't be so difficult for so many dragon warriors. Kang Xinmu directly went forward. The dragon soul golem exuded a water-attributed aura, and the space around it began to churn violently. When Kang Xinmu rushed forward, the dragon soul demon statue suddenly erupted. Countless water vapor exploded in the space of the hall, and the exploding water attribute power rolled up rolling waves that swept toward Kang Xinmu like a huge wave that drowned his entire black dragon body. The power of the dragon soul demon statue was indeed at the second stage of the super divine dragon statue. For Kang Xinmu, this level of attack strength was no longer a threat to him. In particular, he was still in the state he was in during the second round of defense. It hadn't been long. The various attribute attack power that he had devoured previously still made his resistance to all attribute attacks the strongest. Therefore, the dragon soul demon statue's huge wave explosion did not pose any threat to Kang Xinmu. On the contrary, Kang Xinmu immediately released his own attack after blocking the opponent's attack. Offensive stance. 9th stage ultimate dragon explosion. Kang Xinmu's Chen Xing completely transformed into offensive battle runes. At the same time, the effect of the 33 Heavens divine feathers was also activated by Kang Xinmu, and nearly 100 dragon explosions were released. The terrifying power instantly exploded in the hall of the hall. At the same time, Yi Yin also attacked. The black dragon body that he had transformed into was like a ghost. When he suddenly appeared in the hall, a pitch-black dragon's breath suddenly erupted and shot toward the dragon soul demon statue. The power of the attack was not inferior to Kang Xinmu's 9th stage ultimate dragon explosion at all. Furthermore, the attack was more compact and concentrated on one point. This way, it would be easier to break through the opponent's defense. To Kang Xinmu, this attack method was very compatible with him. As expected. Although the power of the attacks from both sides was similar, Kang Xinmu's attack was divided into nearly 100 dragon explosions. On the other hand, Yi Yin's attack was concentrated on one point and directly penetrated the body of the dragon soul demon statue. To Jiang Shenwu, this was simply the best news he had ever received. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Kang Xinmu directly released endless devouring power and poured it into the body of the dragon soul demon statue. Although it was only a dragon soul demon statue and not a living creature, the devouring power could still touch the opponent's weakness. Devour. Chapter 5106. The cooperation between Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin was flawless. Without any superfluous moves, Kang Xinmu's devouring power entered the dragon soul golem, constantly devouring its power. The first water elemental dragon soul golem was almost defenseless in front of Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin. Although Yi Yin didn't know what was going on. However, he could clearly sense that the dragon soul golem was constantly weakening under Kang Xinmu's attacks. Its aura was getting weaker and weaker, and it soon lost its original combat strength. What's going on? It's as if Kang Xinmu is devouring the dragon soul demon statue's fighting strength. Yi Yin's feeling was not wrong, but he could not confirm it. All in all, it was a good trend for him. The stronger Kang Xinmu was, the easier it would be for them to defeat the dragon soul golems. Yi Yin was not only teaming up with Kang Xinmu to deal with the dragon soul golem, but he was also observing Kang Xinmu's actions. He wanted to figure out Kang Xinmu's combat strength so that he wouldn't have to face Kang Xinmu in the third round. That was also what they had to do when they formed teams of twos to deal with the dragon soul golems. At this moment, wasn't Kang Shinmu also observing Yi Yin? Although Yi Yin was defeated by Kang Shinmu in the first round of the world-let battle, it did not mean that he was vulnerable. At that time, he probably didn't react in time. If Yi Yin had displayed the same defensive ability as he did in the second round, it would have been difficult for Kang Shinmu to defeat him in one move. Therefore, this Yi Yin's reaction is a little slow. Or rather, his sense of danger is lacking. Kang Shinmu thought. At that time, Yi Yin had been hiding, and no one had been able to find him. During the chaotic battle in the small world, he had not made a move and had been observing the others. At that time, Kang Shinmu had killed everyone else, leaving him alone. He had not expected that Kang Shinmu would be able to discover his hiding place and attack the void directly. Therefore, when Kang Shinmu made his move, he was unable to react in time. This meant that Yi Yin's reaction was slightly slower and his sense of danger was lacking. Since that was the case, Kang Shinmu didn't need to care too much about Yi Yin's other aspects of combat strength. If he met him in the duel stage, he could directly use this method to fight. Yi Yin wouldn't be a match for him at all. Most importantly, with Kang Shinmu's defensive means, he could easily hold his ground against anyone. At this moment, with Kang Shinmu's devouring and Yi Yin's continuous dragon martial skill attacks, countless holes appeared on the body of the water attribute dragon soul demon statue, and its strength became weaker and weaker. Soon, the water attribute dragon soul demon statue was no longer a threat to Kang Shinmu and Yi Yin. With a loud bang, it exploded. The power of the water attribute scattered and collapsed in all directions in the temple. Then, Kang Shinmu and Yi Yin both discovered several shiny objects at the place where the dragon soul demon statue exploded. What's this? Kang Shinmu and Yi Yin looked at each other and went forward to take a look. They found a total of 5 crystal-like objects. Although I don't know what they are, there are 5 of them. How are we going to divide them between the two of us? Kang Shinmu slightly frowned and secretly raised his guard. He didn't intend to fight with Yi Yin, but he had to guard against him. Yi Yin laughed and said, Kang Shinmu, there are 5 of them in total. You take 3, and I'll take 2. What do you think? If we can defeat the next dragon soul demon statue, we'll split them. What do you think? Okay. Kang Shinmu nodded. This Yi Yin was very sensible. He knew how to take a step back. They didn't know what these crystals were used for, but since they appeared in the dragon soul demon statue, they couldn't be useless. Kang Shinmu got 3 first, and Yi Yin took 2. Then, the two of them sensed that 2 of the dragon soul demon statues around them were moving at the same time, 2 dragon soul demon statues. This time, they were dragon soul demon statues with fire and lightning attributes. When the 2 dragon soul demon statues began to move, Kang Shinmu and Yi Yin both felt a great deal of pressure. It seems that the difficulty of the dragon soul demon statues is indeed getting higher and higher. Not only are the dragon soul golems twice as powerful as the previous water elemental dragon soul golem, but there are 2 of them at the same time. Kang Shinmu and Yi Yin looked at each other and nodded. The previous dragon soul demon statue was a bit easy to deal with. But now, the difficulty had increased by at least 4 times. Besides, Kang Shinmu roughly understood that the 5 crystals were a trap set by the Dragon Soul Tower. They would team up and challenge the Dragon Soul Demon statues. Who would be willing to suffer losses? When the 5 crystals appeared, there might be a fight already. On the other hand, Yi Yin handled it well by taking the initiative to let himself suffer losses and avoid a conflict with Kang Shinmu. Besides, there were some hidden dangers in such a setup. For example, in the first round of the Dragon Soul Demon statues, Kang Shinmu obtained 3 crystals, while Yi Yin only obtained 2. In that case, Would Yi Yin attack Kong Shinmu when he realized that he couldn't defeat more Dragon Soul Demon statues in the next round? When he couldn't get more crystals, he would deal with his companions first and perhaps get more crystals. This kind of mentality was very normal. Of course, since they were able to come to the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower and pass through the trials to reach this round, none of the dragon martial artists would turn against them so easily. After all, everything was monitored by the Dragon Soul Tower. Who knew if the final score would be related to their performance? It wasn't just their combat strength, but also their temperament. All in all, there were some traps set up, and they just didn't step on them. Kong Shinmu only needed to cooperate with Yi Yin and kill as many Dragon Soul Demon statues as possible. At this moment, 2 Dragon Soul Demon statues appeared at the same time. One was of the fire attribute, while the other was of the thunder attribute. Kong Shinmu went to block the thunder attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue. Yi Yin, on the other hand, went to block the fire attribute Dragon Soul Golem. Without the slightest superfluous words, both sides began to erupt. Kong Shinmu cast a guardian stance and began to devour the thunder impact power launched by the thunder attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue. All the power almost enveloped Kong Shinmu's entire black dragon body. Then, he moved with a loud bang. The terrifying power almost made Kong Shinmu unable to hold on. Chapter 5107. Kong Shinmu almost failed to resist the first wave of attacks. However, his defensive stance was still very firm. Coupled with the fact that he had transformed the dragon soldier Chen Xing's battle runes into defensive battle runes, he was finally able to resist the opponent's attack head-on. Moreover, Kong Shinmu began to devour the opponent's thunder attribute power. Soon, he gained a stronger resistance against the power of the lightning attribute. Then he looked at Yi Yin's side. Yi Yin's defensive abilities were already impressive, but at this moment, he did not use any defensive abilities. Instead, he relied on his extremely strange body techniques to tangle with the fire attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue. The Dragon Soul Demon statue kept unleashing fire attribute dragon martial skills, but it could not touch Yi Yin's black dragon body. Yi Yin's black dragon body did not look small, but it was extremely agile. Kong Shinmu could sense that his understanding of spatial void power was also very good. He could travel through the void in an instant and go to another safe place. If we split up like this, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to kill these 2 Dragon Soul Demon statues. Why don't we work together? I'll block their attacks, and you find an opportunity to attack them. As long as you injure them, I can take the opportunity to destroy them. Kong Shinmu quickly suggested. He did not lack offensive methods, but in this situation, the Dragon Soul Demon statue's defense was too strong. If he wanted to achieve results, he could only use some powerful methods. That was not what he wanted. Therefore, it was best to cooperate with Yi Yin. Yi Yin had the same idea. Although his attacks were powerful, and his concealment and body techniques were quite outstanding, he could not do 2 things at the same time. While dodging and defending, he almost could not find any opportunity to attack his opponent. In fact, even if he attacked, it would be offset by the Dragon Soul Demon statue's attack. It was best for the 2 of them to work together like they did in the previous round. Immediately afterward, Kong Shinmu's black dragon body flew in front of the fire attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue and blocked several of its fiery blasts. These fiery powers were all devoured by Kong Shinmu. The 2 Dragon Soul Golems gathered together, but at this moment, Kong Shinmu seemed to feel that the power of the 2 golems had increased again. Is it because we've gathered together? Or is it because the power of the Dragon Soul Golem will increase with time? Kong Shinmu didn't know which reason it was, but in any case, he had to get rid of the 2 Dragon Soul Golems first. He kept unleashing the 9th stage Extreme Dao Flood Dragon Burst, but this attack was just a cover. In reality, it didn't have much destructive power. After all, Kong Shinmu's Chen Xing dragon weapon was a defensive battle rune, and the divine dragon tyrant body art was also a defensive stance. He kept attracting the attention of the two dragon soul golems. At this time, Yi Yin was finally free. Looking at the situation in front of him, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This Kong Shinmu is too strong. Despite facing off against two dragon soul demon statues at the same time, it showed no signs of losing. As expected of a character that can last until the end of the defense round. I'm afraid these two dragon soul demon statues haven't reached his limit yet, right? Yi Yin thought to himself, but he didn't slack off in the slightest. He unleashed 9 waves of attacks at the fastest speed. His 9 waves of attacks were the Black Dragon's Breath, which condensed into a beam of light that had the most terrifying penetrative power. The Black Dragon's Breath hit the Thunder Attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue in the blink of an eye. Because the 9 Black Dragon's Breath hit the same spot, the defense of the Dragon Soul Demon statue was finally broken, and a wound appeared on it. That wound gave Kong Shinmu another opportunity. The devouring power surged into the body of the Dragon Soul Demon statue with a loud bang. The Dragon Soul Demon statue was made of some kind of extremely hard material, and what drove it were the countless array formations and runes engraved on it. Although it didn't have a weak body of flesh and blood like the dragon martialists, these Dragon Soul Demon statues were more afraid of the array formations being destroyed. Kong Shinmu's devouring power eroded the body of the Thunder Attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue. Moreover, as he devoured them, he could clearly sense the various details and effects of the formation imprints. If I devour a Dragon Soul Demon statue, doesn't that mean that I can create such a Dragon Soul Demon statue? Kong Shinmu was a little depressed. These Dragon Soul Demon statues were very powerful existences. Of course, those array formations were only secondary. Even if he mastered those array formations, he would still need the more important core of the formation eye to let the Dragon Soul Demon statue unleash this level of combat power. When Kong Shinmu devoured, he also felt the existence of some of the core of the formation eye. Those core of the formation eye determined the greatest strength that the Dragon Soul Demon statue could unleash. The other array formations only determined the movement and function of the Dragon Soul Demon statue. There are many levels of core of the formation eye. The core of the Thunder Attribute formation eye determines that its power has reached the 3rd level of the Transcendent God realm. Kong Shinmu thought to himself. The power of the 3rd level of the Transcendent God realm couldn't be created casually. The core of the formation eye that determined its power couldn't be replicated by Kong Shinmu because he was only at the peak of the Dragon Emperor realm. The core of the formation eye required some special power of the 3rd level of the Transcendent God realm to create. So, even if I master all the array formations, I can only create an empty shell of this Dragon Soul Demon statue? Kong Shinmu was a little disappointed. However, he still activated his devouring power and kept devouring the Dragon Soul Demon statue. Be it the array formations or the core of the formation eye, they were all devoured by him. All the power was concentrated in his devouring space and transformed into the purest devouring power. The cycle was endless. As Kong Shinmu's devouring power eroded the Thunder Attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue, some problems soon appeared. However, Kong Shinmu felt that the Dragon Soul Demon statue seemed to be recovering rapidly. It actually has a very strong recovery ability. This shocked Kong Shinmu again. This meant that the power of the 2 Dragon Soul Demon statues in front of him was much stronger than that of the Water Attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue. Perhaps not every team would be able to defeat the 2 Dragon Soul Golems at the same time. It was unlike the Water Attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue from before, which seemed to be for everyone to practice with. At this moment, the attacks of the 2 Dragon Soul Demon statues were getting more and more intense. Jiang Shenwu could feel that their strength was rapidly increasing. Although this rate of increase was not as fast as the increase in the surrounding attacks during the previous round of the competition, it was still enough to make him feel pressured. After all, the attacks of the two dragon soul demon statues were originally at the third level of the transcendent god realm. If they continued to strengthen, it would undoubtedly be even more terrifying. Chapter 5108. At this moment, Kong Shinmu's devouring power was already extremely powerful. However, in the face of the Thunder Attribute Dragon Soul Golem, it actually couldn't reduce much of its combat power. After all, the opponent isn't a living creature, but a golem. As long as its core formation I isn't destroyed, its combat power won't be reduced too much, Kong Shinmu thought to himself, but he still continued to devour the Thunder Attribute Dragon Soul Golem. On one hand, the devouring power could enhance his defensive ability. On the other hand, although the effect was minimal, the Dragon Soul Golem was still somewhat affected, just not too much. As long as he continued, the power of the Thunder Attribute Dragon Soul Golem would be devoured sooner or later. Anyway, Kong Shinmu wasn't afraid of the attacks of the two Dragon Soul Golems. No matter what kind of attacks the Thunder Attribute and Fire Attribute Dragon Soul Golems launched at Kong Shinmu would always be able to resist them. Although it wasn't easy for him to resist them, he was basically unscathed. Yi-In, apart from the Thunder Attribute and Water Attribute Dragon techniques, do you know any other dragon techniques? Kong Shinmu suddenly thought of this. It wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with the two Thunder Attribute Dragon Soul Golems. However, what Kong Shinmu was worried about was that if three other Dragon Soul Golems of other attributes appeared, it would be difficult for him to resist them if he didn't make preparations in advance. According to the current situation, the activated Dragon Soul Golems were getting stronger and stronger. If the next two Dragon Soul Golems joined forces, Kong Shinmu might not be a match for them. Not to mention that there might be three of them. Therefore, he had to make preparations in advance. The only thing that Kong Shinmu could do now was to rely on Yi-In. If Yi-In knew dragon techniques of other attributes, then Kong Shinmu could devour their power and turn it into his own resistance against the power of that attribute. After hearing Kong Shinmu's question, Yi-In secretly pondered. He didn't answer immediately. Obviously, he was analyzing the pros and cons. Only now did he realize that Kong Shinmu seemed to be able to devour the power of a certain attribute, and then increase his resistance against that attribute. But now there was a problem. Yi-In also had a lot of hidden abilities. Did he need to expose them in front of Kong Shinmu? The reason why he didn't want to expose himself was because if he encountered Kong Shinmu in the third round, he might be able to defeat Kong Shinmu. However, when he thought about it carefully, with so many people left, the possibility of encountering Kong Shinmu in the final battle was not high. Moreover, until now, Yi-In actually had some doubts. Was he really a match for Kong Shinmu? Even if Yi-In used all of his hidden tricks, he found that he couldn't do anything to Kong Shinmu, not to mention the tricks he had shown so far. This was what Yi-In was most conflicted about. Since it was useless to hide, what was the point of hiding? He might as well unleash his full potential now and work together with Kong Shinmu to defeat more Dragon Soul Demon statues. Yi-In was sure that Kong Shinmu still had some hidden tricks up his sleeves. However, just the tricks he had shown now were enough to crush Yi-In. No matter what, Yi-In felt that the possibility of him defeating Kong Shinmu was slim. From the start of the Small World segment, he felt that Kong Shinmu's strength seemed to be much stronger than his. The defense segment just now had confirmed this point once again. Kong Shinmu could actually resist the attack of a level 5 transcendent god, which shocked him. At this thought, Yi-In finally made a decision. Yes, I've cultivated every attribute of the Dragon Martial technique so that I can fight in different environments. Yi-In quickly answered Kong Shinmu. When Kong Shinmu heard this, he was not very happy. Instead, he was a little worried. After all, it was very difficult for a person to simultaneously cultivate multiple dragon martial skills to the pinnacle of all the dragon martial skills. In this way, if Jiang Shenwu wanted to devour those energies and strengthen his body's resistance, he would have to spend even more time. After all, the stronger the power devoured, the faster Kang Shenmu's resistance would increase. However, there was no time to worry so much now. Anyway, the Thunderfire Dragon Soul Demon statues haven't been defeated yet. We still have time to slowly deal with them, Kang Shenmu thought to himself before saying to Yi Yin, then use your dragon martial techniques on me. Yi Yin did not think too much about it. Anyway, the dragon martial techniques that he casually used now could not break through Kang Shenmu's defense. After all, Kang Shenmu was using all his strength to deal with the attacks of the two Dragon Soul Demon statues. Therefore, Kang Shenmu could be said to be in a state where his defense was on full alert. In this situation, Yi Yin did not think that he would hurt Kang Shenmu. Based on Kang Shenmu's defense, wasn't that a joke? Immediately after, Yi Yin took the initiative to attack. In addition to the thunder, fire, and water attributes, Yi Yin was actually able to display the power of various other attributes. Star attribute, hurricane attribute, wood attribute, ice attribute, dark attribute, all kinds. This Yi Yin really hit it well. Kang Shenmu could not help but look at this kid in a different light. It seemed that his foresight was not bad. Most importantly, the various elemental dragon martial skills that Yi Yin had displayed were all at least at the level of a Holy Spirit dragon martial skill. Furthermore, they were all heaven-rank Holy Spirit dragon martial skills. Without a doubt, Yi Yin's strength was extremely terrifying, and the talent hidden in it was even more terrifying. Even though Kang Shenmu had the devouring power, it was difficult for him to have all these dragon martial techniques of different attributes at the same time. After all, although he could directly learn and comprehend the dragon martial techniques through devouring, it was difficult to find so many people who were willing to devour for him to cultivate. If it was someone else, Kang Shenmu would really not be willing to devour. After all, it was not good to bite off more than one could chew. Cultivating too many dragon martial techniques would be useless, and instead, it would expose his ability to devour and cultivate dragon martial techniques. Therefore, it was really not easy for Yi Yin to cultivate so many types of dragon martial techniques at the same time. At the very least, his talent had to be top-notch. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to cultivate every type of dragon martial technique to the heaven rank. Moreover, the financial resources behind him were quite powerful. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to obtain so many Holy Spirit dragon martial techniques to cultivate. This Yi Yin was not simple. However, Kang Shenmu knew that it was not the time to be emotional about this. In Yi Yin's eyes, he was also not simple. Immediately after, when Yi Yin displayed those dragon martial techniques, Kang Shenmu began to devour the power of those dragon martial techniques. These dragon martial techniques were all released towards Kang Shenmu. Chapter 5109. Regardless of what the two Thunder and Fire Dragon Soul Golems were thinking, Kang Shenmu began to devour the dragon skills of various attributes launched by Yi Yin. As he devoured the power of various attributes, his resistance to them also increased rapidly. Although he didn't reach the limit, it soon doubled his resistance to the corresponding attributes. Besides, Yi Yin's attack continued. Kang Shenmu's devouring also continued. The Thunder Dragon Soul Golem kept attacking Kang Shenmu, but it couldn't break through Kang Shenmu's defense. Kang Shenmu's defense was now impregnable, and it wasn't something the Dragon Soul Golem of this level could resist. During the devouring process, Kang Shenmu soon discovered something peculiar. As he devoured, he actually mastered the array formation and array core of the entire Thunder Dragon Soul Golem. As long as he had the materials, Kang Shenmu could even replicate the Dragon Soul Golem. Of course, the core materials were bestowed by powerhouses who injected power into them. If Kong Shinmu were to create a dragon soul golem now, it would at most be equivalent to the strength of the Dragon Emperor at his peak, which couldn't be compared to the dragon soul golem in front of him. However, mastering the technique of creating a dragon soul golem was already quite amazing. Perhaps no one, including Yi Yin, would have thought that Kong Shinmu would have such a terrifying ability. Creating a dragon soul golem could only be done by powerhouses of the Dragon Soul Tower, and it was never taught to outsiders. Of course, the dragon soul golem that appeared in front of Kong Shinmu and the others now wasn't the strongest dragon soul golem, nor was it the core. The core dragon soul golem had the soul of an ancient dragon injected into it, and it was the 18 guardian golems of the entire Dragon Soul Tower. It wasn't something that Kong Shinmu could create. However, perhaps I can let the Black Dragon's consciousness and the Demon God Ancestor's consciousness enter the Dragon Soul Golem? In this way, Kong Shinmu would be able to get rid of those two experts. But at the same time, when Kong Shinmu encountered problems, he couldn't ask them for help. There were pros and cons to consider, so there was no need to think too much about it for now. As Kong Shinmu's devouring power continued to erupt, the lightning attribute Dragon Soul Golem's flaws became more and more severe during the battle. Like a clock tower that could no longer ring its bell, the Dragon Soul Golem's movements became slower and slower, and the attacks it unleashed became weaker and weaker. It even lost its accuracy and could not hit Kong Shinmu at all. All of this indicated that the lightning attribute Dragon Soul Golems had almost been dealt with. In contrast, the fire elemental Dragon Soul Golem became even more ferocious at this moment. Endless flames exploded in the arena. The power of the lava condensed from the void and enveloped Kong Shinmu. Kong Shinmu's black dragon body was soon burned into charcoal. Although his muscles and bones were not hurt, he looked extremely wretched on the surface. Yi Yin wasn't idle either. While he was constantly attacking Kong Shinmu with various powers, he also began to attack the lightning attribute Dragon Soul Golem. The lightning attribute Dragon Soul Golem was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Now that it was being attacked by Yi Yin, it naturally couldn't withstand it. Soon, the situation became that Yi Yin kept bombarding the Dragon Soul Golem while it was down. Kong Shinmu, on the other hand, was fighting the fire elemental Dragon Soul Golem one-on-one. Kong Shinmu's previous devouring focus was on the lightning attribute Dragon Soul Golem. But now, he directly shifted his focus to the fire elemental Dragon Soul Golem. The fire elemental Dragon Soul Golem already had the remnants of Kong Shinmu's devouring power. When Yi Yin attacked earlier, he blasted a gap in the two Dragon Soul Golems. Kong Shinmu naturally took the opportunity to submerge his devouring power into the two Dragon Soul Golems. But now, there wasn't much devouring power left in the fire elemental Dragon Soul Golem that Kong Shinmu had. The gap in the Dragon Soul Golem was still there. After all, it was just an artifact and not a living thing. Otherwise, with its powerful combat power, it would have automatically recovered. Hence, Kong Shinmu continued to release the devouring power. Due to the devouring power, as Kong Shinmu's combat state got better and better, the fire elemental Dragon Soul Golem's power was constantly being devoured by Kong Shinmu, and it began to fall into the same cycle as the lightning attribute Dragon Soul Golem. As long as he could resist the opponent's attack, Kong Shinmu would be invincible. And now, what Kong Shinmu needed the most was a sharp attack. As long as he could break through the opponent's defense and send the devouring power into the opponent's body, Kong Shinmu would enter an invincible state. Chen Xing's arrival provided such an opportunity for Kong Shinmu, and now he only lacked a dragon technique. Of course, he didn't plan to cultivate more dragon techniques now. He planned to directly cultivate a Super Shinshin dragon technique after reaching the transcendent grade, which would be a truly powerful move. At this moment, the fire elemental Dragon Soul Golem was becoming weaker and weaker as Kong Shinmu continued to devour it. Yi Yin didn't forget to release various dragon techniques for Kong Shinmu to devour. In the process, Kang Xinmu became stronger and stronger, and his resistance to various elements reached an astonishing level. He hadn't reached his limit yet, but he was close to it. Yi Yin's power is still a little weak. However, it's already not easy for him to cultivate so many dragon techniques of different attributes at the same time, and each of them is about the same level as my 9th extreme dragon burst. It could only be said that Kang Xinmu's defense was too terrifying. Therefore, although Yi Yin's attack was strong, it still wasn't terrifying in Kang Xinmu's eyes. Yi Yin's attack was completely devoured by Kang Xinmu and turned into resistance to various elements. As time passed, the Thunder Elemental Dragon Soul Golem had long been blasted into pieces by Yi Yin alone. As for the Fire Elemental Dragon Soul Golem, it was already in danger and would soon be devoured by Kang Xinmu until it lost its vitality. This time, the 2 Dragon Soul Demon statues will probably leave 5 crystals each. 5 crystals each? Yi Yin asked tentatively. This division was relatively fair. After all, Yi Yin also contributed a lot. Besides, Yi Yin blasted a hole in the bodies of the 2 Dragon Soul Golems, which was also crucial for Kang Xinmu. Hence, Kang Xinmu nodded in agreement. Kang Xinmu directly gave the crystal left by the Thunder Elemental Dragon Soul Golem to Yi Yin. Chapter 51:10. In the second round of attacks, the Dragon Soul Golems were of the thunder and fire attributes. At this moment, Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin joined forces and quickly destroyed the 2 Dragon Soul Golems. However, after they destroyed the 2 Dragon Soul Golems, the prompt from the Dragon Soul Tower made them a little depressed. That was because there were dozens of teams participating in the Dragon Soul Golem challenge this time. When Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin defeated the 2 Dragon Soul Golems, 6 teams had already defeated the 2 Dragon Soul Golems. This is completely normal. Although our battle style is slow, it's more reliable. Yi Yin said with a smile. He could also tell that Kang Xinmu was better at defense now, so as long as they resisted the attacks of the Dragon Soul Golems, victory would belong to them sooner or later. Kang Xinmu shook his head. He wasn't too satisfied with his results. Even though Yi Yin's reasoning wasn't wrong, but he felt that he should have done better. Let's continue. If there are 3 Dragon Soul Golems next, I'll try to kill one of them quickly. Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin discussed their tactics. Yi Yin nodded in agreement. Anyway, the main combat power now was Kang Xinmu, and he would listen to whatever Kang Xinmu said. However, this didn't mean that he didn't have his own opinions. On the contrary, he was usually very assertive and could make his own decisions. But now that he met Kang Xinmu, he could only listen to Kang Xinmu and didn't need to think on his own. Even if he had to think, he would only make some small changes based on Kang Xinmu's opinions. This was because Yi Yin had completely acknowledged Kang Xinmu's strength. Yi Yin trusted Kang Xinmu's judgment very much. Then, 3 Dragon Soul Golems appeared in the entire hall. Just as Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin had guessed, these 3 Dragon Soul Golems were actually equivalent to powerful 4th stage Divine Dragon Warriors. If a 1st stage or 2nd stage Divine Dragon Warrior were to challenge, the 3 Dragon Soul Golems in the 3rd round would probably be 5th stage or even 6th stage Divine Dragon Warriors, right? Jiang Shenwu and Yi Yin looked at each other, and they both sucked in a breath of cold air. It was said that the difficulty of the Dragon Soul Golem challenge was based on the challenger's cultivation level. For example, Jiang Shenwu and Yi Yin were both at the peak of the royal stage. Hence, the Dragon Soul Demon statue that appeared in the 1st round was 1 level stronger than them. It had the strength of a Transcendent God Stage 2. For the 2nd round, the 2 Dragon Soul Golems with thunder and fire attributes were 3rd stage Divine Dragon Soul Golems. And now, the 3 Dragon Soul Golems that appeared were 4th stage Divine Dragon Soul Golems. If Jiang Shenwu had not teamed up with Yi Yin but had teamed up with a level 1 transcendent god, the difficulty of the challenge they faced would have been even higher. The 2 dragon soul golems in the second round should not be too much of a problem for many teams. However, it was almost the limit. If 2 second-stage divine dragon warriors teamed up, the 3 dragon soul golems in the third round would all be 6th-stage divine dragon warriors. Basically, no one could defeat their opponents. But now, Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin still had a chance. These 3 dragon soul golems have hurricane, ice, and metal attributes. They aren't too strong in terms of attack attributes, so they aren't too difficult to deal with. Of course, their strength is too terrifying. We have to be careful and follow the plan. Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin looked at each other and nodded. The other 2-man teams basically reached the end of their journey. In the end, they could only obtain 15 crystals. If they split it between 2 people, each of them would get 7 or 8 crystals. However, if Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin could defeat the 3 dragon soul golems in front of them, they would receive a total of 30 crystals. Each of them would get 15 crystals. And the things that could be exchanged for would definitely be much better than 7 or 8 crystals. Soon, as the 3 dragon soul golems appeared, Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin attacked the metal attribute dragon soul golem before the 3 dragon soul golems gathered together. This time, Kang Xinmu's dragon god tyrant body technique had completely switched to an offensive stance. Moreover, the battle patterns in Chen Xing's dragon weapon had all been converted into offensive battle patterns. He needed to destroy the mobility of one of the dragon soul golems with Yi Yin as soon as possible. Otherwise, there would be no need to continue this battle. It was also at this moment that Kang Xinmu erupted with his strongest attack. 9th stage Extreme Dragon Blast. At the same time, he also used the 333 Sky Divine Feathers and released 9 layers of attacks. The attack landed on the Dragon Soul Demon statue with a loud rumble. However, Kang Xinmu's attack wasn't too powerful. After all, the 333 Sky Divine Feathers had just entered the battle stage, so it could only release 9 layers of attacks and not the full power of 33 layers. Therefore, Kang Xinmu's attack was like a tickle to the Dragon Soul Golem. However, at the same time, Kang Xinmu had already attracted the attention of the Dragon Soul Golem. The metal attribute Dragon Soul Golem was shining with golden light all over its body. When it was hit by the pitch-black Dragon Blast, this golden light became its most perfect protective power. Kang Xinmu was almost unable to break through this golden light. However, the Dragon Soul Golem immediately unleashed a terrifying killing move at Kang Xinmu. Countless golden rays turned into golden sword lights and condensed into an endless vortex that enveloped Kang Xinmu. This golden swordlight vortex was filled with killing intent and could almost completely obliterate any existence that hadn't reached the transcendent grade. However, Kang Xinmu disappeared at this moment. His black dragon form vanished from the battlefield. This was what he had planned long ago. He had used the space-type ethereal energy to do this. With his current understanding of the spatial attribute void power, he could naturally open up an independent space. Of course, he used the dragon weapon star to open up this independent space. Nothing from the outside world would be able to disturb him while he hid inside. At the same time, Kang Xinmu's devouring power was already spreading in the hall outside. The devouring power that he had left behind began to devour the endless golden sword-light vortex. If he was the only one fighting the opponent, the metal attribute Dragon Soul Golem would only need to stand guard here and Kang Xinmu would have no way of surviving. This was because Kang Xinmu's independent space couldn't be maintained for too long. At least, it couldn't last until the golden sword-light vortex was completely devoured. However, Yi Yin was still here. Right now, Kang Xinmu couldn't switch to a defensive state. Even if Kang Xinmu went all out, he might not be able to withstand a single blow from the opponent. Therefore, this was the only way. Chapter 51:11. Yi Yin was stalling for time for Kang Xinmu. When the other two dragon soul golems gathered and surrounded Yi Yin, Kang Xinmu was constantly devouring the power of the metal dragon soul golem. Moreover, he attached his strongest power to this power. In other words, he combined the opponent's power with his own power. The ninth stage Extreme Dao Turtle Dragon Burst was already beginning to condense. Moreover, Jiang Shenwu was currently in a state of full firepower. After fusing with the power of the vortex of golden sword light he had devoured, his turtle dragon burst was now golden in color. Yi Yin had already lured the other two dragon soul golems away, so he didn't encounter any danger for the time being, but he couldn't help Kang Xinmu anymore. The metal-attributed dragon soul demon statue continued to launch attacks at Jiang Shenwu. Terrifying energy descended from the sky, blasting towards him. At this moment, Kang Xinmu finally estimated that he had devoured enough power. After fusing with his own power, it was enough to pose a threat to the metal dragon soul golem. Because he had devoured the attacks of the dragon soul golem several times, and each time, he could devour about half of its power, this was Kang Xinmu's most powerful move with the devouring power. Of course, it was also because the gap between him and the dragon soul golem wasn't very big. Although it was more powerful than him, it wasn't much stronger, and there wasn't a particularly exaggerated difference. Otherwise, even if Kang Xinmu could devour half of its power, he wouldn't be able to resist the remaining half. At this moment, Kang Xinmu was ready. Just as Yi Yin was surrounded by the two dragon soul demon effigies, and the space around him was sealed, the dragon soul demon effigies suddenly appeared. Kang Xinmu finally made a move. He had been accumulating for a long time this time to ensure that his attack could completely destroy the metal dragon soul golem in one go. Otherwise, the situation would become quite bad, and Kang Xinmu would probably have to use more trump cards to deal with the current situation. The ninth extreme roaring dragon burst, accompanied by waves of golden sword gleams, swept toward the dragon soul golem. A terrifying power swept through the void violently. The metal dragon soul golem itself was an extremely tough existence, and an ordinary attack of a level 4 supreme god might not be able to break it, however. The defense of the metal dragon soul golem wasn't particularly strong, but its attack ability was extremely terrifying. Therefore, it could be said that Jiang Shenwu had devoured half of the power of his several attacks and fused it into his own attack. The destructive power was already more than 10 times stronger than Jiang Shenwu's own power. At this moment, the golden sword gleams enveloped the ninth extreme roaring dragon burst and enveloped the dragon soul golem. With a loud bang, the dragon soul golem began to collapse. The power of the golden sword gleams was something that the dragon soul golem couldn't withstand. Immediately after, Kang Xinmu didn't relax. Instead, he activated the ninth extreme roaring dragon burst at an even faster speed and unleashed the power of the 33 Heavens Divine Plume. The 33 Heavens Divine Plume couldn't completely unleash 33 attacks yet, but Kang Xinmu was working hard to unleash its power again and again. Therefore, Kang Xinmu's attacks were getting stronger and stronger. Originally, the power of the golden sword gleams that Kang Xinmu had devoured and his own power couldn't completely destroy the metal dragon soul golem. At most, he could only weaken its combat power and destroy more than half of it. It still had the ability to defeat Kang Xinmu. It was still a threat to Kang Xinmu. However, Kang Xinmu's continuous attacks made the metal dragon soul golem lose the possibility of fighting back. This was because, while he was attacking continuously, the devouring power continued to exert force and devoured the core formation inside the dragon soul golem. What it devoured was not power, but it could destroy the core formation. Every time a core formation was destroyed, the power of the dragon soul golem would decrease. With Kang Xinmu's actions, the entire dragon soul golem was collapsing at an astonishing speed. I can't hold on any longer. At this moment, Yi Yin's voice was heard not far away. Although his situation was very urgent, he did not panic at all. He still appeared to have a card up his sleeve. However, Kang Xinmu also knew that he really couldn't hold on any longer. Yi Yin's defense was ordinary, at least compared to Kang Xinmu's. Facing 2 dragon soul golems that were equivalent to level 4 Supreme God, he really couldn't hold on for long. However, at this moment, Kang Xinmu finally destroyed the metal dragon soul golem completely. Immediately after, Kang Xinmu flew toward Yi Yin. Next, it was a 2-on-2 situation again. In the previous 2-on-2 situation, Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin had already worked together and successfully killed the dragon soul golem. This time, Kang Xinmu had already killed a stronger dragon soul golem. As long as Kang Xinmu came back to his senses and seized the opportunity, the remaining 2 would not be too troublesome. Everything went smoothly. Half an hour later, the power that Kang Xinmu had devoured erupted once again and integrated with his 9 ultimate dragon blast. The terrifying power directly shattered the ice attribute dragon soul golem into several pieces. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he completely destroyed the hurricane attribute dragon soul golem. These 2 dragon soul golems were a little difficult for Kang Xinmu to deal with, mainly because the defense of these 2 dragon soul golems was very strong. Compared to the metal attribute dragon soul golem, their attack power was also weaker. Therefore, Kang Xinmu had to devour more power to be able to destroy them. In the process, Yi Yin kept harassing the 2 dragon soul golems. To be honest, without Yi Yin's cooperation, Kang Xinmu would not have been able to defeat the 3 dragon soul golems on his own. Although Yi Yin did not have that kind of decisive effect, he had bought too much time for Kang Xinmu and created too many opportunities for Kang Xinmu. Without Yi Yin, Kang Xinmu would not have been able to resist the attacks of 3 dragon soul golems at the same time, or even 2. The key was to think of a way to counterattack while resisting the attacks. In any case, Kang Xinmu could not do it alone. Therefore, Yi Yin had indeed helped Kang Xinmu a lot. In the end, the 3 dragon soul golems left behind 15 crystals. Of these 15 crystals, Kang Xinmu naturally obtained 7, while Yi Yin obtained 8. In addition to the 15 crystals that had been distributed previously, everyone had 15 crystals. With regards to this distribution, Yi Yin felt that he had taken advantage of the situation. Because he was only a support in the battle. Chapter 51:12. Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin had a good time working together. All in all, Yi Yin respected him. After all, the main combat power of their cooperation was still Kang Xinmu. However, sometimes, Yi Yin would let Kang Xinmu take advantage of him. That was why they could work together until now. As for the other teams, after Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin destroyed the 3 dragon soul demon statues together, the Dragon Soul Tower's notification came. They were the first 2-man team to destroy the 3 dragon soul demon statues. Kang Xinmu did not know how the others were doing. However, when they had just defeated 2 dragon soul demon statues, their ranking was at the bottom. Now that they had defeated 3 dragon soul demon statues, they were actually ranked first. Obviously, in the 3rd round of the challenge of the dragon soul golems, many teams were either too weak or couldn't beat them. Or there was some conflict within the team. No matter what, Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin had gained quite a lot. Next, it's the dragon soul demon statues of the 5th level, right? And I'm afraid there are a total of 4 of them. Kang Xinmu said to Yi Yin. His words were rather solemn. Generally speaking, it was almost impossible for Kang Xinmu to defeat a 5th-level opponent, and it was even more difficult for Yi Yin to defeat them. Even if Kang Xinmu could use the power of the starry sky, it would be difficult for him to defeat 4 dragon soul demon statues of this level. Not to mention, it was impossible to use the power of the starry sky in the Dragon Soul Tower. Soon, after Kang Xinmu said that, the two of them saw 4 dragon soul demon statues appearing around them. Each of the 4 dragon soul demon statues had the power of a 5th-level transcendent. However, to their surprise, the 4 dragon soul demon statues didn't attack them as a group. Instead, only one of them moved. All 4 dragon soul golems have been activated, but only one dragon soul golem is attacking us. Could it be that they're going to take turns fighting us? Kang Xinmu's guess was very likely, and in the current situation, this was the most likely possibility. It took time to activate the dragon soul demon statue. There was some time between the first, second, and third rounds to give the dragon warriors who challenged the dragon soul golem time to prepare. In the 4th round, all 4 dragon soul golems were activated at the same time, and no one knew when the second one would attack. Yi Yin, let's do this. You guard against the 3 dragon soul golems around, and I'll deal with this activated dragon soul golem. How does that sound? Kang Xinmu said in a deep voice. Can you do it alone? Yi Yin was a little worried, but he was also looking forward to it. It should be possible, let's give it a try. Kang Xinmu nodded and said. After all, his current defensive ability was indeed tyrannical, and after the dragon soul golem was activated, it had the power of the earth attribute. Previously, he had devoured a lot of Yi Yin's earth attribute dragon skill power, and his resistance to the earth attribute had reached the peak. Therefore, he could give it a try. Attack! Jiang Shenwu immediately made his move and swept towards the dragon soul demon statue. As he attacked, Yi Yin did not stay idle either. Instead, he began to cast some defensive formations around Kang Xinmu and the dragon soul golem. Although Yi Yin really could not resist the dragon soul golem of level 5 transcendent god in a head-on fight, the other party would probably be able to kill Yi Yin in an instant. However, he now had time to set up formations to fight against it. Perhaps that was the main point of this round of Dragon Soul Golems challenge. It was basically impossible to deal with 4 Dragon Soul Golems at the same time. After all, the cultivation level of these 4 Dragon Soul Golems was 5 levels higher than the Dragon Warrior who was participating in the challenge. If the challenger was at level 1 Transcendent God, then the 4 Dragon Soul Golems in this round should be terrifying existences at level 6 Transcendent God. Let the challenger fight 1 against 4? That was simply impossible. Therefore, the 4 Dragon Soul Golems were activated one by one to give them some buffer time. Most importantly, they could use this buffer time to set up formations. In this way, they might be able to fight against the 4 Dragon Soul Golems. Based on Kang Xinmu and Yi Yin's cultivation, if they were proficient in some formations, whether it was defensive or offensive, they should be able to fight against an opponent at level 5 Transcendent God. Of course, if this went on for a long time, they would definitely be broken through by the opponent. However, it was enough to be able to resist. Kang Xinmu did not think that there was anyone who could defeat 4 Dragon Soul Golems that surpassed him by 5 levels. However, there was no doubt that he had to give it a try. He wanted to get first place in this competition. In that case, even if the Dragon Soul Golems didn't count towards his points, he had to give it a try. The attack of a level 5 Transcendent God was already very terrifying to Kang Xinmu. The Earth Attribute Dragon Soul Golems, even if it was just a casual attack, would be able to cause countless bone-deep wounds on Kang Xinmu's black dragon body. Dragon blood spurted wildly in the void. However, Kang Xinmu's devouring power allowed him to continuously recover from his injuries, and the recovery speed was extremely fast. Of course, it wasn't just because of the devouring power. There was also the recovery power of the Dark Dragon Filth Mastery skill, which could speed up the recovery speed of his injuries and strength. If not for that, Kang Xinmu would have been seriously injured in one move and wouldn't be able to take it. But now, Kang Xinmu had blocked 7 to 8 attacks from the opponent. Moreover, in these 7 to 8 attacks, Kang Shinmu's devouring power kept on devouring the opponent's attack energy. Luckily, this Dragon Soul Golem has Earth attribute energy. The Earth attribute's defense is stronger but its attack is slightly weaker, so I can block it, Kang Shinmu thought to himself. However, the consequence of this was that if Kang Shinmu wanted to completely destroy this Dragon Soul Golem, he would need an even stronger power to kill it. He needed to devour more than 10 attacks from the opponent. This brought a lot of pressure to Kang Shinmu. No matter how strong his recovery ability was, it was impossible for him to recover completely after every attack. So now, his injuries were already very serious. He couldn't use the devouring power to heal his injuries. In that case, he would exhaust his attack energy and it would be even more difficult for him to defeat that Dragon Soul Golem. So now, Kang Shinmu was almost using his limit. In the end, he even used the Brilliant Ruby Stone. The power of the Brilliant Ruby Stone was naturally able to block the opponent's attack. Moreover, Kang Shinmu's devouring power followed closely behind and devoured the opponent's attack energy again. After gathering the power of 10 attacks, Kang Shinmu finally integrated it into the 9 Ultimate Dragon Explosion. Chapter 51-13. Kang Shinmu single-handedly challenged the 5th-level Earth Dragon Soul Demon statue. In the end, he actually exploded with one move and shattered the Earth Dragon Soul Demon statue. As the Earth Attribute Dragon Soul Demon statue crumbled, Yi Yin was dumbfounded. He really did not expect Kang Shinmu to be able to deal with such an existence alone. Wasn't this a little too terrifying? One had to know that Kang Shinmu was only a peak Emperor level. However, this Earth Dragon Soul Demon statue had the strength of a 5th-level Transcendent. Although the Earth Dragon Soul Demon statue's attribute was restrained by Kang Shinmu, it was mainly because its defense was stronger and its attack was slightly weaker. Hence, it was very easy for Kang Shinmu to resist. As long as he continued to resist, he would devour the opponent's power and condense it. Then, he would be able to shatter the Dragon Soul Demon statue. However, it was still a 5th-level Transcendent. Even if its attack was slightly weaker, it was still a 4th-level Transcendent. If its defense was stronger, it would definitely surpass an ordinary 5th-level Transcendent and might even be close to the 6th-level Transcendent. Such an existence. Even some 3rd-level Transcendent geniuses would find it difficult to defeat it. However, Kang Shinmu relied on his own strength to shatter the Earth Dragon Soul Demon statue. It was too terrifying. Yi Yin was shocked. Of course, he also knew that this was related to Kang Shinmu absorbing and devouring his various attributes. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for Kang Shinmu to resist the opponent's attack. No matter what, the first Dragon Soul Demon statue had been destroyed. Then, the two of them felt the other Dragon Soul Demon statue around them move at the same time. Next, it was even more difficult for Kang Shinmu to defend. After all, the attacks of the other 3 Dragon Soul Demon statues were getting stronger and stronger. It was not the Earth Dragon Soul Demon statue that focused on defense, so its destructive power was extremely strong. When Kang Shinmu was defending the checkpoint previously, he couldn't resist the attacks of this level for long. Fortunately, there was only one activated Dragon Soul Golem now, so he only needed to face one type of attack at the same time. That was why he was able to deal with the situation more easily than when he was defending the checkpoint. At the very least, he wouldn't be bombarded by the opponent's attacks to the point of instantly collapsing. Previously, he had been besieged at the defense checkpoint. There were attacks from the 5th level of the Transcendent God from all directions. Kang Shinmu did not even have the time to devour them. But now, he had a way to devour half of the attack's power for his own use, and he only needed to block the remaining half. Even so, Kang Shinmu was surrounded by perils. Even the Dark Dragon Filth Mastery and the power of devouring couldn't keep him in a complete state, because the opponent's attacks were too strong. Kang Shinmu couldn't even fully activate his devouring power. The power he devoured was only 30% to 40% of his opponent's attack power because his devouring power would be obstructed by his opponent. The other party's strength was too great. This was the true power of a fifth-stage transcendent god. However, Kang Shinmu still blocked it in the end. He still used the power of the heaven-deficient demonic dragon of ice and fire. The power of the heaven deficient allowed him to change the flow of time between him and the dragon's soul golem. Once his opponent attacked, Kang Shinmu would have enough time to devour his opponent's power. However, because the dragon's soul golem was so powerful, Kang Shinmu needed to consume more power to change the flow of time around it. After blocking 2 attacks, Kang Shinmu's heaven-deficient power was exhausted. However, the power of these 2 attacks didn't threaten me at all. Instead, I devoured them completely. It's time. Kang Shinmu launched a counterattack. After a loud bang, the dragon's soul golem was smashed into pieces by him. After this one, there were 2 more. Unfortunately, Kang Shinmu's heaven-deficient power was almost exhausted. Devour. The smashed dragon soul golem was quickly devoured by Kang Shinmu's devouring power. Then, its power was converted into heaven-deficient power in Kang Shinmu's devouring space. The heaven-deficient power that had been used up previously was now fully recovered. This allowed Kang Shinmu's injuries to continue to heal. It's really a tag team battle. Kang Shinmu discovered that after the second dragon soul golem was smashed, the third dragon soul golem was unsealed and flew directly toward him. However, he didn't know that this level was not only about defeating the opponent. Instead, he only needed to resist for a certain amount of time to pass. The 4 dragon soul golems would attack one after another. Eventually, all 4 of them would attack together. If he could resist for a certain amount of time, he would be considered to have passed the level and obtained 5 crystals. In total, 4 dragon soul golems would give him 20 crystals. However, Kang Shinmu used the terrifying devouring power to destroy the dragon soul golem. This could be said to be extremely terrifying. But for Kang Shinmu, this couldn't be more normal. On the contrary, Yi Yin sensed that something was wrong. He knew very well that if the 4 dragon soul golems were to engage in a tag-team battle, no one could defeat them except for a heaven-defying existence like Kang Shinmu. They would even have to use all their strength to resist the opponent's attack. I'm afraid this level is supposed to be very simple. Unfortunately, Kang Shinmu seems to have misunderstood. Yi Yin was a little puzzled. But since he misunderstood, so be it. The best defense was to get rid of those dragon soul golems. He believed that the reward would definitely not be too bad. Soon, the 3rd and 4th dragon soul golems were activated one after another, but they were still directly killed by Kang Shinmu. As long as Kang Shinmu couldn't be killed instantly, Kang Shinmu could turn the tables in the end. This was the terrifying part of the devouring power. However, this was almost Kang Shinmu's limit, and he had made some preparations in advance. Otherwise, Kang Shinmu might have been killed instantly. Even now, he was still in danger and needed Yi Yin's support from the side. Many times, when Kang Shinmu was about to be unable to hold on, it was Yi Yin who took action to buy some time for Kang Shinmu. As long as he could buy some time, Kang Shinmu could devour more of the opponent's attack power and recover more of his injuries and strength, so that he could accumulate the power to defeat the dragon soul golems. In the end, the 4 dragon soul golems were all smashed by Kang Shinmu one by one. The 4 dragon soul golems in this level were smashed to pieces by Kang Shinmu's attack. However, Kang Shinmu didn't use his own power. Instead, he mainly gathered the power of the dragon soul golems and gathered it to the limit to attack the dragon soul golems. This could be regarded as a strategy, but if it were someone else, even those dragon martial artists who had the talent to counterattack, they wouldn't be able to do this at all. Because the opponent's strength was too great. The talent to counterattack definitely couldn't withstand this level of power. The main pressure was still borne by Kang Xinmu himself. Therefore, he was very clear about the principle of the capable getting more. Since Kang Xinmu contributed more than him, it was normal for him to get more crystals. The Dragon Soul Tower was definitely very fair. What can I exchange for with 35 crystals? Kang Xinmu thought to himself. As he thought so, a form and options appeared before him. He was a little surprised. The rewards could be exchanged now? Weren't there still 2 more Dragon Soul Golems? However, Kang Xinmu didn't think too much about it. He realized that there were too many things that could be exchanged for crystals. First of all, 5 crystals could be exchanged for a high-grade Super Divine Dragon Technique or a Heaven-grade Super Divine Dragon Weapon. This meant that Kang Xinmu could actually exchange for 7 high-level Super Dragon Techniques? Or 7 Heaven-level Super Dragon Weapons. Of course, Kang Xinmu didn't lack dragon weapons now. The formless weapon, Chen Xing, was far superior to all Super Dragon weapons. Only a formless weapon like him could compare. Therefore, Kang Xinmu directly set his sights on high-level Super Dragon Techniques. 1 crystal could be exchanged for a low-level Super Dragon Technique. 2 crystals could be exchanged for a mid-level Super Dragon Technique. However, high-level Super Dragon Techniques required at least 5 crystals to be exchanged. To Kang Xinmu, these dragon techniques were more precious. After all, apart from this channel, he would have to pay a considerable price if he wanted to obtain Super Dragon Techniques through other channels. The Transcendent Divine Dragon Martial Technique was not the Holy Spirit Dragon Martial Technique. Super Dragon Techniques of the same level were worth more than a Holy Dragon Techniques by more than 100 times. A high-level Holy Dragon Technique might only cost 5,000 gold dragon coins. However, a high-level Super Dragon Technique could be sold at the 5 Extremes Mysterious Ice Holy Land for at least 500,000 gold dragon coins, and there might not be that many to choose from. But now, in front of Kang Xinmu was a considerable number of Super Dragon Techniques to choose from. I just happen to need Super Dragon Techniques. Although I can't cultivate them now, I can start cultivating and upgrading them when I reach the Transcending God level. It wasn't a bad idea to exchange for some now. Soon, Kang Xinmu was the first to choose. Every Holy Land had a high-grade Transcendent Divine Dragon Martial Technique, but it was not very comprehensive. Only the Dragon Soul Sacred Tower had records of every type of Transcendent Divine Dragon Martial Technique. First, I need a body-tempering Super Dragon Technique, an offensive one, and a defensive one. Kang Xinmu thought to himself. It should be noted that the Ultra-Divine Dragon Martial Techniques that could be exchanged here were not all for the 5 crystals. Kang Xinmu saw some on the list that required 10 or even 15 crystals to exchange for high-grade Super Dragon Techniques. That was because some of the Super Divine Dragon Martial Techniques required some cultivation resources to cultivate. For example, the materials that Kang Xinmu needed to cultivate the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Art had been exchanged for by Kang Xinmu using a lot of resources. In the Dragon Soul Holy Tower, when one exchanged for the Super Mystical Dragon Martial Technique, the cultivation resources needed for cultivation would be included. Of course, those cultivation resources weren't free. They were directly exchanged with crystals and could not be exchanged individually. There are quite a lot of types of body-tempering dragon techniques. Kang Xinmu quickly saw many body-tempering dragon techniques on the list. Furthermore, they were the most expensive among all types of dragon techniques. That was because, if one wanted to cultivate body-tempering dragon martial skills, these high-level Super Divine Dragon Martial skills would require a set of cultivation resources. Therefore, they required the most crystals. To Kang Xinmu, there was no doubt that the body-tempering dragon technique was the one that would increase his strength the most. Therefore, Kang Xinmu was only staring at the body-tempering dragon technique. Chapter 51-15. Kong Shinmu quickly picked a few body-refining dragon martial skills. He could be said to be familiar with body-refining dragon martial skills, but he could also not be said to be unfamiliar with them. Although he had cultivated quite a few body-refining dragon martial skills, he did not have much research on the other body-refining dragon martial skills that he had not cultivated. Therefore, it was not easy to choose a body-refining dragon-type martial skill. Primordial Dragon Body. The dragon martial skill and body-refining cultivation resources required a total of 15 crystals. Heaven's Might Tyrant Body Technique. The dragon martial skill and cultivation resources required a total of 20 crystals. Divine Dipper Dragon Technique. This body-refining dragon-type martial skill required 25 crystals. Kong Shinmu looked at the body-refining dragon martial skill and could not help but feel a headache. Wasn't the consumption too high? Although there were many dragon warriors who practiced body-refining dragon martial arts techniques in the entire Dragon God clan's great world, it shouldn't be common. Why was it so expensive? However, the most Kong Shinmu could accept was 25 crystals. After all, in addition to the body-refining dragon martial skill, he still needed to leave 10 crystals to exchange for attack and defense-type super divine dragon martial skills. This Divine Dipper Dragon technique seems to be very good. The introduction below the Divine Dipper Dragon technique was very simple. After successfully cultivating it, one could automatically absorb the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth and turn it into Divine Dipper armor. The defensive ability was quite strong, and most importantly, this Divine Dipper Dragon technique could be used as a supplementary attack dragon martial skill. The body-protecting divine aura that was cultivated could be used to attach to the attacking dragon martial skill, making the attacking dragon martial skills might even stronger. The Divine Dipper Dragon technique is very strong in defense, but its attack is not weak either. After cultivating it, the strength of the divine dragon body will also increase. Kong Shinmu felt that this was very good. After comparing it with other body-refining dragon martial skills, Kong Shinmu decided to cultivate this Divine Dipper Dragon technique. High-level super divine dragon martial skills were extremely rare. Most importantly, the Dragon Soul Holy Tower had already prepared all the materials needed to cultivate the Divine Dipper Dragon technique. When Kong Shinmu decided to exchange for the Divine Bulwark Dragon technique, the 25 crystals in his hand disappeared. In its place was a secret manual that recorded the Divine Gale Dragon technique and a storage ring. Kong Shinmu could sense that there were many precious cultivation resources in the storage ring. Divine Astral Soul Essence. The God Wind was not a power that could be casually cultivated. Otherwise, it would not be a transcendent dragon martial skill. The so-called Divine Shield of the Divine Shield Dragon incantation came from a certain forbidden land in the Dragon God's great world. It was a forbidden land between heaven and earth, and even supreme experts could not enter it easily. If one were to enter carelessly, it was very likely that one would encounter danger. Therefore, the God Shield was one of the top powers in the world. Although the divine aura power cultivated by cultivating the divine aura dragon incantation was not as strong as the divine aura in the Forbidden Land, it was still quite terrifying compared to the dragon martial artists of the same level. The divine shield could be used for both offense and defense. Most importantly, it did not require the cultivator to constantly pay attention to it. The God Shield would always be around the cultivator. The Divine Aura Dragon incantation has extremely strong defense. According to the information I have now, if I successfully cultivate the Divine Aura Dragon incantation, it would be equivalent to cultivating the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Art to the dragon level. If I cultivate the Divine Aura Dragon incantation to the earth level, I'm afraid it would be similar to the sacred level of the Divine Dragon Tyrant Body Art. If I cultivate the Divine Aura Dragon incantation to the extreme sacred level, what kind of power would that be? Kong Shinmu found it hard to imagine. Of course, the divine aura dragon incantation also had its weaknesses. This body-refining dragon martial skill did not increase the defensive strength of the divine dragon body too much. It was only similar to the divine dragon tyrant body art. But most importantly, the cultivated God Astral Soul incantation. The God Astral Soul could be continuously superimposed around the body. The upper limit of the superposition was the level of the divine aura dragon martial artist's cultivation. The defensive strength of the God Astral Soul incantation was extremely terrifying. It was several times or even more than 10 times stronger than the defensive dragon martial skills of the same level. However, the disadvantage was also obvious. The God Astral Soul could be scattered. If the opponent continued to attack, they could gradually scatter the God Astral Soul incantation. That way, the defense of the God Astral Soul incantation would not be so strong, and it would gradually weaken. After that, if the God Astral Soul incantation wanted to recover, it would require a relatively long period of rest. Of course, this was not a big problem for Kang Xinmu. He could completely devour the opponent's power and recover the God Astral Soul incantation. This way, his God Astral Soul incantation would exist almost forever. That defensive strength could be said to be at its peak. If the current Kang Xinmu cultivated the divine aura dragon incantation, as long as he cultivated it to the dragon level, it would no longer be a pipe dream for him to block the attack of a level 6 supreme god. It would be possible. The key was that if the opponent wanted to scatter the God Astral Soul incantation, it would depend on the strength of the cultivator's physical body. The stronger the divine dragon body of a dragon martial artist, the stronger the God Astral Soul incantation. It would be harder to scatter it. And now, there was no need to say more about the strength of Kang Xinmu's divine dragon body. He was definitely the most terrifying among the dragon martial artists of the same level. No matter how strong the defense of others was, they could only use the defensive dragon martial skills. Only Kang Xinmu relied solely on the body-refining dragon martial skills to defend. With just his physical body, Kang Xinmu had already surpassed the defense of most dragon martial artists of the same level. He even surpassed some Supreme God stage powerhouses. This was extremely rare. This was because he had cultivated too many body-refining dragon martial skills, although there were many body-refining dragon martial skills that Kang Xinmu no longer took to heart. Those body-refining dragon martial skills still passively strengthened his divine dragon body. Putting the effects aside, the few body-refining dragon martial skills added together could provide a very strong defense for Kang Xinmu. No matter what, the divine aura dragon incantation was more in line with Kang Xinmu's expectations. Especially the God Astral Soul incantation, which could be combined with his own devouring power, could never be scattered. That was the true terrifying defense. Although the God Astral Soul could be scattered, its strongest point was its strong defense. Its defense was more than 10 times stronger than the defense of the same level dragon martial skills. Generally, if one did not encounter an opponent that was too strong, it would take a very long time to scatter the God Astral Soul incantation. And now, Kang Xinmu could use devouring power to restore the God Astral Soul. This was the most terrifying part. No matter what, the opponent could not shatter the God Astral Soul incantation. Then, when Kang Xinmu faced some opponents, as long as the opponent did not surpass him by too much, he would always have the defense of the God Astral Soul incantation. It was equivalent to an absolute defense. No matter what, it was impossible to defeat Kang Xinmu. Chapter 51:16. New God of all times has won. 3 million words. Recommended reading. It's a pity that the Great God Dragon technique is a super mystical dragon technique. I can't cultivate it now. Kang Xinmu thought to himself. It was a pity. He was a peak-stage Emperor-level dragon inheritance blood, so unless he encountered some special circumstances, he really couldn't cultivate the Great God Dragon technique. Then, he began to choose the next super mystical dragon technique. One was an offensive dragon technique, and the other was a defensive dragon technique. Originally, Kang Xinmu had cultivated a body-refining dragon technique, so the defensive dragon technique wasn't very effective. Basically, he didn't need to cultivate it anymore. However, Kang Xinmu wanted to improve his defense to the extreme. Now, he didn't have many active defensive methods. He only had a brilliant gem. But there were too many restrictions on the brilliant gem, hence, Jiang Shenwu was thinking that if he could cultivate a defensive dragon martial technique, even if its defensive ability was not as strong as the brilliant ruby stone, it would still be able to continuously execute it. It would also be able to increase his defensive ability. Therefore, he chose to focus on a defensive dragon martial skill. Canopy of Despair. This was the defensive dragon technique that Kang Xinmu chose. It required 5 crystals to exchange for. This was a top-notch super divine dragon martial technique, but its price was only 5 crystals. That was because it was a top-notch super divine dragon martial technique recorded here. If one wanted to cultivate it to its peak, they didn't need to obtain this dragon martial technique, but rather, they needed to be more compatible with the dragon martial technique. It didn't mean that a dragon martial artist would be able to obtain the strongest super mystical dragon technique in the Dragon Soul Holy Tower with just 5 crystals. If the dragon technique was not compatible with one's body, then one might not be able to cultivate to the Supreme Sage realm. As everyone knew, cultivating a dragon technique to the heaven grade was not the true peak. Above the heaven grade, there was the Sage and Supreme Sage realms. However, not everyone could cultivate all of the dragon martial skills to the Saint level and Ultimate Saint level. This required a certain degree of compatibility between the dragon martial artist and the dragon technique. The heaven grade could be achieved through hard work. Any dragon martial artist that cultivates any dragon martial skill would be able to cultivate the dragon martial skill to the heaven level. However, the Saint level and the Extreme Saint level, these two realms allowed one to display the might of the dragon martial technique by several times. If one wanted to cultivate it, they would have to rely on compatibility. Therefore, this selection was a very important matter for all the dragon martial artists, and it also depended on luck. No one knew what type of dragon martial technique they were most compatible with. On the other hand, Kang Xinmu wasn't worried at all. Since he had the ability to devour, even if this dragon martial technique was not compatible with him, he could still find a dragon martial artist who had cultivated this dragon martial technique to its peak, consult them, and use the devouring method to improve. Of course, now that Kang Xinmu had the devouring power, he would basically be compatible with any dragon martial technique. It was impossible for him to not be compatible. Therefore, he could choose as he pleased. The Desperate Canopy was the defensive dragon martial skill he had chosen. This defensive ultra-divine dragon martial skill was able to condense a defensive barrier. This defensive barrier was the Despair Canopy, a large-scale defensive barrier. Although its defensive capabilities were not particularly outstanding, the key was, this Despair Canopy could shrink and expand. By shrinking, he could defend a smaller area, but his defensive capabilities would become stronger. If he expanded, the defensive range would become larger, but the corresponding defensive capabilities would be slightly weakened. This was what Kang Xinmu valued. This defensive dragon martial skill would be rather flexible when used. If it was a large-scale battle, he could directly expand the Despair Canopy to block most of the opponent's attacks. But to Kang Xinmu, the most important thing was to reduce the defensive range. This way, he could increase his defensive capabilities to the maximum, and to a certain extent, he could increase his own defensive capabilities to a terrifying level. What he was most afraid of now was being killed in one hit. Therefore, with the Despair Canopy, he could take the right approach and defend against the opponent's strongest attack. This way, he could prevent himself from being killed in one hit, and his safety was also higher. Moreover, the Despair Canopy was a dark attribute dragon martial skill. For Kong Shinmu, it was originally a rather compatible existence, and it would be easier to cultivate. After choosing the Despair Canopy, Kong Shinmu finally chose the offensive type dragon martial skill. Super Divine Dragon Martial Skill, Kong Shinmu should only be able to cultivate these three types of dragon martial skills. As for the other types, he would probably not dabble in them. At most, he would cultivate other body tempering dragon martial skills. But it was not necessary, it was just icing on the cake, and could not make him stronger. Therefore, under normal circumstances, Kong Shinmu would not consider more. Therefore, this offensive dragon martial skill had to be carefully chosen. There are the most types of offensive dragon martial skills. I want something that is more suitable for me, and it's best if it can become stronger and stronger in battle. For example, the 33 Heavens Divine Plume, a dragon weapon's brilliant material, could be continuously strengthened in battle, and finally achieve the effect of 33 layers of attacks. This was rather useful for Kong Shinmu. Many times, his defensive capabilities had reached a certain level, but the strength of his attacks was not enough. But this kind of increasingly strong offensive dragon martial skill was very suitable for Kong Shinmu. Therefore, Kong Shinmu headed in this direction and began to choose Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul. Very quickly, Kong Shinmu found an offensive dragon martial skill that was suitable for him. Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul. This Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul's introduction was very simple, but it was very suitable for Kong Shinmu. When this dragon martial skill is used, it can create a dragon soul. This dragon soul can continuously attack the opponent. And the dragon soul will become stronger and stronger in battle, and can absorb the power of the surrounding heaven and earth, as well as the power released by both sides in battle. This is similar to my devouring power, which can devour the opponent's power to counterattack. If I use the devouring power to support this extreme destructive heavenly might dragon soul, wouldn't it be very strong? Kong Shinmu thought in his heart, he was looking forward to this extreme destructive heavenly might dragon soul. It was a pity that when the extreme destructive heavenly might dragon soul was used at the beginning, its power was not strong, it could not even be compared to the 9th stage extreme Dao dragon explosion. This dragon martial skill could only display its true power when facing experts. As the battle progressed, its power would become stronger and stronger. Divine Astral Dragon Technique, Despair Canopy, Extreme Destructive Heavenly Might Dragon Soul, these were the three types of dragon martial skills that Kong Shinmu chose this time. And this consumed all 35 crystals that he obtained this time. Of course, crystals could be exchanged for a lot of other things other than dragon martial skills, but for Kong Shinmu, it was not as great as exchanging for dragon martial skills, not to mention that other things could be bought in the market.